All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the C Show. I'm here with my man, William, the General Satterwhite. He's going to bring all of his military strategies into the game of football and break it down for us. You mentioned a while ago I was the Bama fan, so it was Bama that good, or was they just had everybody locked down that they couldn't get COVID? Because I don't remember one top Alabama player getting COVID last year. Even Saban got it.
I don't think anybody did. I know Saban had the test scare before the Georgia game, but that ended up being a false positive. But yeah, Bama, whatever they, but me and you, we've talked about it a couple of times before. Saban has his program locked down, and he's a master of making sure that nothing. His program is basically a machine. So whatever.
I don't know if Bryant had that kind of control. I know he had control, but it's like almost. I don't want to say like a prison, but they know what time to be in bed, what time to be up, what time to be at practice.
I'm not sure if I would say it's a prison. My understanding, the way that I understand his system and his setup, it's kind of just like it's like a job. It's kind of like you're actually in the NFL and you're actually having
it's most definitely a mini camp. Because you look at last year, they with Najee coming back and Smith coming back and Mac Jones. You had three. I know COVID probably had some play in it, but you had three top players in the Heisman. And that's unheard of. And another thing that's so amazing to me is you have so many kids, and I can't blame them at all, when you're that good of an athlete making that kind of money. But how you can talk a player like Najee Smith coming back, who's going to be a first-round draft pick, or Smith coming back, how he keeps these players down there, I'll never know.
You know what I think it is I think it's that mentality that he goes into when he's recruiting these players, is that he tells them, you're going to have to compete, but competing is going to bring out the best in you. And we're going to make sure. So yeah, like Devontae Smith, he might have been a first round draft pick last year if he had a win early. But would he have been? What was he? I think he went sixth, or he went to the Dolphins. He went, what was it, sixth or fifth?
Yeah.
Was he going to be a top 5 draft pick?
Probably not.
But that just goes into the mental, and that's another thing that I think Saban has down packed is when he goes to recruit these kids. It's kind of like what Saban is kind of like what Schellenberger was when he built Miami back in the 80s. You recruit a kid who understands that it's just not about me. It's a lot of kids who can say, well, yeah, I just want to get to all these kids want to get to the pros, but there's a difference between wanting to get to the pros just as quickly as possible and just using college as a stopgap, and those kids who actually want to get to the pros, and when they get to be as prepared as possible, but also want to maximize their potential while they're in college. And that's what I think.
Do you think that he goes after the type of athlete that is going to want to have that college degree to go along with that NFL that's important to them, as opposed to just being one and done? Because I think that speaks a lot of. I think that speaks a lot of their character too. To stay, when you could go make that extra, $1 million, but no, you went back to make sure you got your college degree, to hold on to that. It's just amazing because you think, I remember a couple years ago when they had that Tua Jalen thing, and I was watching Mac Jones then, and I would watch the first quarter because by then it was 35-0, but I would turn back on and watch the last last part of the third quarter and fourth, and I was watching Mac and I was like, damn, he could be starting for 8 teams right now in the SEC.
Well, wasn't he like maybe not a 5-star, but wasn't he like a 4-star recruit coming in
He
the
was
same class?
out of Jacksonville, Florida,
Yeah.
and I look at these players, and nothing speaks to them is they will go sit on the bench for 3 years and not hardly play, and then come out and have that season. I mean, one of my favorite quarterbacks, I wish he'd have got him a national championship, Blake Smith. A fifth-year senior, sat on the bench for 4 years and came out and stayed with the system and got him an SEC championship ring. Man, that speaks a lot to the character of the athletes that Saban goes after down there.
And like I said, that's the main thing that I always look at is the character, because it's funny to me. People talk about schools like USC and Texas and Miami and Florida State about how they've fallen off and about this and that and about, oh well, it's because they're not recruiting right. And those schools are still finishing. I mean, they might have a blip here or there, but they're still finishing in the top 10, top 20 in recruiting every year. It's just the kids that they're bringing into school aren't the same they're the physically talented, and they're the same level of physical talent as the kids that are going to Alabama and these other schools, but it's the character thing, and it goes back to, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I want to touch on two things. If you're finishing in the top 15, top 12 recruiting each year, you should be competing for a national championship, because there's not that much difference. We're going to
get this playoff thing and about how it's supposed to even the play. I don't mind the expansion of the playoff, but it's not gonna fix what's going on at Miami and Florida State and all Texas and US. That's not gonna fix what's going wrong with those schools.
And touch on the character thing that you said a while ago. When Bryant, and I told you about that the other night when I don't know if I finished telling the story about when there was some players that walked on in Alabama in like 66 or 67, and Bryant wanted them to make the team because he was wanting. What I was reading, he was wanting to integrate as early as the 60s because he's seen what was taking place, the athletes that he wanted to get. And he said
that any coach back then had to.
Yeah, and he's seen it, but he said that they said that he knew that the only way that he could get the Alabama faithful to follow along with it is to get them on the field and show them. And he said there was 3 players, and he said, and they couldn't give a scholarship, but they said every day to go and practice, Bryant would stop and encourage them, and not to give up, to keep fighting. And they were going to start. I mean, they'd already won 3 starting positions, and then something happened with their home life, and they all had to quit, and that set Alabama back 4 years before they could ever start recruiting, the black athletes.
And you had to experience going out to USC and getting pummeled by a team that had black players on it for the fans.
That was in Birmingham.
Was it in Birmingham?
Yes, I think that was in Birmingham when Sam Cunningham ran all over Alabama.
Yeah, I was thinking it had to be in California because I was thinking that maybe they wouldn't bring in USC to play in Alabama, but you might be right.
I think at that time it changed a little bit because back in I think it was back in the 50s, Alabama refused to play Penn State because Penn State had some black athletes. And I was watching this thing, and I guess these old school coaches in the South were so much different. But Namath he didn't have the grades to get in some school, and they showed him to Bryant, and Bryant came down there, and Namath said it was just a culture shock because being up there in Beaver Falls, the school was totally integrated. He played with all his players or teammates were black, played on black basketball team, and he gets down there, and it was just a culture shock to him. And he said he remember one day that they was running a play, he was running an option, and he pitched the ball right and pitched the ball wrong, and the ball went on the ground, and Coach Bryant said something to him, and Namath kind of shook his head and said, "Yes, sir." And he said, and then Bryant and Bryant was a big man, said, and he had him up by the face mask, and he said, "Son, when you talk to me, you talk to me as sir. You understand that?" And it was just such a different era. I'm surprised they didn't get somebody killed back then. I mean, because they would work them with no water, all day long, and I'm surprised one of those players didn't get killed.
Well, well, you also have to keep in mind a lot of those players back then were coming from home environments where they weren't. I don't want to call the modern. I don't want to call us. I mean, modern generations coddled or anything, but they were coming from. You got to think a lot of those players were coming from. It was only back in the '60s. You were only pretty much a generation removed from the Depression. So you got to think.
That's true.
Players back then were used to harder environments
Yeah.
than what kids nowadays are growing up are used.
Yeah, I mean, because you're compared, our age, we're coddled from, what those guys were back then, and and so on and so forth. Because that's what when I was talking about the other day about I was talking about these kids were they said Bryant could never coach today with these players, and I was like, "What do you mean?" They was talking about, well, how rough and tough he was, and he said, the guy made a stupid statement. He goes, and he said, you couldn't get in one of the black players' face like that. And I said, have you ever seen Saban on the sideline? And I said, he doesn't care if they're black, white, or green. I said, these kids, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, they're mentally tough enough that they can handle a coach getting in their face and getting on their ass.
I'm gonna tell you this. These coaches, when I guess people just don't understand the recruiting process and the fact that these coaches go into the homes that these kids are coming from, and they get to know these parents and they get to know where the kids are coming from. And a lot of these coaches are a lot lighter on these kids than what the parents are that these kids are coming from. Yeah, I mean, you and that's what coaching is that when those kids are going off to the college, the coach is basically now your parent away from your they're your parent. So these coaches know, okay, a good coach. Let me rephrase that. A good coach knows, I know where this kid comes from. I know what environment this kid comes from. I know that I can get in this kid's face because his mama gets in his face. Me yelling at this kid for not blocking on this run play is no worse than his mama yelling at him for not taking out the trash last night.
Because I started to hear that several years ago, and when somebody was saying that, it just didn't make no sense to me. I was like, what do you mean Bryant couldn't coach a black athlete today? I was like, I know that he wasn't around him. I mean, that doesn't. But a coach is a coach is a coach. He would have adapted,
Yes.
To that. I mean, you've seen him adapt to a lot of those coaches that grew up with, like Pat Dye. I mean, he adapted to him, and they adapted to it. Bryant would have easily adapted to that. I met Walter Lewis. He was Alabama's last quarterback under Bryant, and Walter was good. And he told me they was in the Liberty Bowl, and Walter's a big man. I mean, he's quarterback. He was an option quarterback, man. He's a big man, and he said that Bryant made some substitutions, and he said Walter Lewis didn't like it, and he got in Coach Bryant's face and started yelling at him. And he said Bryant had picked him up by the shirt like this right here and had his game plan sticking in his chest, his neck. And he said, let me tell you something. He said, there's 32 or 22 minutes left to go in this game. He said, and I'm the head coach for the next 22 minutes. Don't you ever tell me what to do again. And Walter Lewis said he thought, oh, my God, I just got up in Coach Bryant's face. And he said 15 years ago, he said, if I'd have gotten that old man's face, I'd been picking myself up.
Yeah, exactly. That reminds me of to go back to the ideal of modern coaches, great coaches being able to adapt. During the NCAA basketball tournament, there was a Michigan State, Tom Izzo, who was a great basketball coach.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like the second time in the last 2 or 3 years that he's had an incident like this. him and one of his players got into it on the sidelines going in because his player did something. He made some kind of mistake or something, and Izzo got into his face, and the player got back into his face. But that just goes back to what I'm saying is that coaches know their players. A good coach knows their players. Now bad coaches just treat their players like they're just, bad coaches might not know but a great coach knows his players, and they're going to know what they can do with a player and what they can't do with a player. And that's why I said that whole argument that a great coach from back then couldn't be a great coach today, that's bunk.
Oh yeah, I think that's totally ridiculous. I mean, I've heard stuff. They couldn't coach this type of athlete or that type of athlete. And look, they're going to coach an athlete that's good. You forget about that. They're not looking at if they're green or they're orange or something like that. If that guy can run the ball, he's going to be running the ball. I was listening to a story about Pat Dye, and he was still at Alabama then. And I forgot, it was one of the first black players Alabama recruited, and one of the alumni didn't like it. And he told Dye, he said, "You're not signing him." And Dye looked at him and said, "Well, if he signs paperwork, I'm signing him." I don't care what you say. And I mean, it's just, I miss, one thing I missed about the days of football. I love the finesse now. It's fun to watch, but I still miss them 10-7, 17-13, and getting that critical stop down there. And I can remember so many of those games. Like say you were down, or you were 13-7, and you had to punt the ball and pin the team deep inside the 10, holding them, trying to get the ball back to get that score. I love that type of football. I think they've got so much speed now that we'll never see it come back.
Well, what it's going to take? It's going to take some coach. He's probably some assistant right now that we don't even know of, is going to eventually get a job at some school like at a Mississippi State or an Ole Miss or that type of school, and he's going to look at it and he's going to say, it's going to be like Miami back in the 80s when they figured out that you could take the Miami and Florida State back in the 80s when they took the guys who used to be safeties and they put them down at linebacker, and they took the guys who used to be corners and they put them at safety to get all to increase the level of speed, and they took the old linebackers and they put them down at the defensive end to get as much speed out there on the field. And they're going to realize that it's going to have to go the other way in order to compete at that school. And they're going to come and they're going to come up with some kind of way to put a hamper on the speed of the of the speed, because really the evolution of the game has come from the schools like Alabama getting. I think we talked about it the other day when Hugh Freeze was at Mississippi at Ole Miss, and he beat Alabama those 2 years. I think it was 2 years in a row.
2 years in a row.
By spreading things out, and because everybody used to say that can't work in the SEC, and you can't do that. And then it worked for Urban Meyer at Florida, but then people were like, well, that's because you got Urban, that's got Florida talent, that's that Florida speed. But then Hugh Freeze does it at Ole Miss, and then Kevin Summerlin does it at Texas A&M with Johnny Manziel.
Look what Kiffin did this year against Alabama. Kiffin knew how to beat Alabama. That he needed to go hurry up, and Alabama could not have the play set. And Ole Miss was going 70 yards. I mean, I never got the feeling Alabama was going to lose, but I never got the feeling they was going to win either. I mean, Kiffin had the exact game plan called, and I mean, he did. I mean, it was just, and I was sitting there begging Alabama, slow down, stop giving them the ball back, because keep that offense on the sideline. But one thing I believe, and I've been saying this for years, and I truly believe it's going to happen, because really you've only got to have you got to have some backs and a couple good rush ends, and maybe a linebacker. But on offense, you've only got to have 2 running backs, a tight end, a receiver, and a quarterback, and a glorified guard. And the triple option is going to come back.
You know what? I was just about to say, the triple option, not the pure triple option, but some good coach is going to come up with. And now, Brian Bohannon, who's a coach at Kennesaw State right now, he was an assistant under Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech. He's working with he's kind of like the next generation of the triple option coach, and he's doing it to where he's incorporating more of the spread element, but at the same time, he's still more pure triple option and, running it out of the shotgun and stuff like that. And they have some high scoring games, but they also have some of those low scoring games because the triple option, it gives what it takes what the defense gives it.
I mean, I can still see, it come back like in the traditional form where you're running a double wing and you got a receiver over there. And, because if you remember back those Tom Osborne teams, you'd have 4 passes a game and that'd all be 70-yard touchdown passes where everybody had sneaked up on the line. And, you get 6 huge, linemen up there and double down. And you think about it, when you haven't seen that all year long and you get one of those playoffs, you're going to be dangerous. I remember a couple of years ago, Alabama played Georgia Southern, and they went to the triple option, and Alabama had only given up 50 yards rushing a game, and they gave up 350 yards rushing to that team. Mm-hmm. And I believe you will see the triple option in some form or some shape or form coming back. A coach told me one time, and I still believe it's true. He goes, a high school coach, he goes, he said, it don't matter what scheme you run, playbook. He said, the team that tackles and blocks the best is the team that's going to win.
Execution. It's all about execution. That's the name.
Yeah, and that's it. The team that does it the best. So, we talked about that a little bit. So let's go through. So we'll have a little. We did a little. From last year. We talked about Alabama. I still think Alabama probably would have won the national championship because they were just so loaded. I think it would have been a lot tougher. Because Florida almost beat them in that game. Mm-hmm. Ohio State, would probably give them a tougher game. But I still think they was probably the best team. What I'm beginning to see is in football it wasn't even like that. Bryant dominated, but it wasn't even like that with him. You're seeing 4 or 5 teams that are just a cut above the rest of everybody else. And
you know what I think it is? Back in the day, there was more. I'm not going to say that there was more parity, but you had more margin for error. So if you were a Tennessee, let's say Tennessee, mm-hmm. Tennessee lost the game here to Florida. Well, you had things were a little bit more even because there wasn't. Bobby Bowden was probably the best coach from the 70s all the way up into the 90s. But the degree of separation between Bobby Bowden and not to talk about the man, but say somebody like his son, Tommy Bowden. They always had the big Bowden Bowl between FSU and Clemson. Tommy Bowden was a decent coach, but he wasn't he's not a Hall of Fame coach. He's not a legendary coach by any means. But you remember, a lot of those FSU Clemson games were down to the wire, tough. Those close games. There was a degree of separation between the two. Nowadays, you have Nick Saban, you have Dabo Swinney, you have the guy at Ohio State, you have the guy, and I hate to say this one, but Kirby Smart is starting to pick up on it.
I think Kirby hot seat though. I think
Uh-uh.
I'll even throw Lincoln Riley in there. I mean, I know he hadn't won the national
Okay,
championship, but I'll throw Lincoln in there.
I was going to throw Lincoln Riley in there. You have these coaches at these schools who are just I hate to say it, but they are just so much better. And it's not, it's not with these coaches in particular, it's not X's and O's. They're CEOs. It's like the difference between being, it's like the difference between being Mark Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss twins. They're
Yeah.
just their level of innovativeness and ability to understand what needs to be done today so that I'm not falling behind tomorrow.
I was listening to, and that's case in point with Saban. I mean, Saban's one of the guys, where some of the other guys have stuck on to the past. Saban's saying, okay, if I'm going to compete, I need to go ahead and go out and get. And his ego, yeah, he has a great ego, but his ego is not so big that, he went out and hired Lane Kiffin.
Mm-hmm.
No other coach went out there and hired somebody, like Lane.
What was it? Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah.
Did the what's the guy who got fired from Brett Bielema? Wasn't he with Saban?
Brett Bielema, Butch Jones.
Butch Jones.
And and one thing,
all these guys.
The
NCAA says, okay, you can only have 10 or 9 or 10 actual coaches. Saban just says, okay, I'll create a new position called an analyst. Who had analysts 10 years ago? Or maybe
I'd never heard of that before. They got 20 something analysts up there just watching it. And and I was listening to Lane Kiffin. He was doing the best Saban impersonation. Sorry, I had a phone call coming in.
Okay.
They asked, put on Do Not Disturb. They asked Kornheiser about going to Applebee's and having wings and a beer with Saban, and Kiffin was like, "Well, first of all, he doesn't even drink." And he goes, and second of all, he's not going to Applebee's. I said, the only way he's going to like Applebee's is it has to be presented. Yeah, he has to give it to you 2 days in advance, and there has to be an itinerary about what you're going to be talking about. Mm-hmm. And he says, and on his way, his drive in every day, he said he's on the phone the whole time. He said there's not 1 second of his day that's wasted. He said that's why he's so good. He said, everything is, there's not a day that, nothing is wasted.
I think that we talk about, there was this story that I think we talked about a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, about the some burger place or something that's on the Alabama campus or is near the Alabama campus or something.
Oh yeah.
That he was noticing all of his players were being late to practice. Not all of them. Some of his players would be late to practice or would be just showing up to practice on time, or he noticed that there was something with their timing. And he asked them, well, what's going on? And they were talking about, well, we all go to this burger place or if whatever restaurant this is on campus or near campus or whatever. And by the time we get done and we have to get over to practice, it's such a distance between the restaurant and the practice facility that's what takes so much time. And then the next thing they knew, he was having that case. He either had a little satellite branch of that restaurant or something put right near the practice facility, or he had them bring a food truck out or something so that he was able to make sure you're not going to be late to my practice because you're going to this place. I'm going to bring this place to the practice.
And some other coaches back in the old days would have been hard ass. No, you better have your ass to practice now. But that's how smart he is. Okay. You want this burger, then I'm going to get this burger here for you, and you're not going to be late for practice. I mean, and that's what makes. I mean, I think a lot of it's psychology. We was talking about this the other night with the integration thing, and I think it was I want to say it was in Missouri, but it may not have been. But they had like it was when it was first started integrating, but they had 7 or 8 black athletes, and they wanted to wear a black armband in protest, and they were 7 or 8-0 and ranked number 2 in the nation. And the head coach said, no, absolutely not. So all 8 players quit, and they finished 8-4. And I was thinking, I'd have been wearing the damn the arm bracelet with them. I mean,
I think that was Wyoming. I want to say that was they have a special name for them. It's like the
I
Wyoming
think you're
Nine.
right. You know, I think it was out there. I think you're right. It was yeah. I think it was in Wyoming. I mean, it was like when Malzahn and Saban walked around the block with their players for Black Lives Matter, and I heard some of these idiot redneck Alabama fans like, well, "I'll never be an Alabama fan again," and I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I figured you'd have a Black Lives Matter flag hanging from your trailer out there in the trailer park." I mean, what do you expect? I mean, he's got a team that's 85% black. You think he's not going to walk around the block with his players for a peaceful protest? I mean, what are you thinking? I mean. Uh, I mean, that was the dumbest thing I ever heard.
It is, but it's like I say, some things are when you get down to those type things that there's not any logic or common sense to stuff like that with people that say stuff like that because they have their particular mindsets and it's grounded in what it's grounded in. It's grounded.
Oh, yes, well, know exactly what's going to. I mean, uh, and I tell people all the time too. When I post stuff on Facebook, don't pay a third attention to what I'm doing because I'm doing it. I love to stir the crowd. But we got into a thing one time about kneeling for the national anthem, and so the question came to me about being a combat vet, and I said, well, my take on it is kneeling during the national anthem. They're expressing their constitutional right to peaceful protest. I said, so in my view, they are actually honoring the soldiers who paid blood to give them that right to give them that right to peaceful protest. So they are actually paying honor to the soldiers who gave the ultimate sacrifice to protect that right. So if you want to take a knee, then take two. I don't really care because I'm not watching the national anthem anyway. I'm getting the snacks ready.
You know what? That's the thing that's always gotten me about that whole ever since that whole issue got started is that what were we doing before? You notice Fox and CBS, they weren't showing the national anthem before this whole thing became an issue. To sit Troy Aikman and Joe Buck would get up there and introduce the game, and then they say, "Well, we got to toss it down to a commercial." You know what was going on during the commercial break that they had to get down to quickly? The national,
The national anthem.
yeah, they didn't care about the national. I mean, I don't want to say they didn't care about it, but it wasn't a big. Nobody cared about it as much as they cared about it until after the protest began.
And then I like to point out something too, and it shows you that how many the black athletes think of this country. They focus on the two players that are kneeling. They don't focus on the 83 players that are standing there, with their hands on their heart. They focus on the two players that are kneeling or the three players kneeling. They don't focus on the big picture like that. And that's always been, kind of aggravating to me to see that right there. What I told somebody is, I'd rather see somebody go out and a team take arms and kneel down than somebody go out there and burn down a neighborhood or somebody be damaged. Nobody's damaged like that. But hopefully, it'll go over eventually. I don't know, but it doesn't bother me.
The thing is that neighborhoods and I'm not saying this to defend that type of behavior, but you get neighborhoods burned down when you ignore the root of the issue that causes people to be kneeling in the first place. If you actually dealt with the issue at hand, we would never get to the point to where we're burning down neighborhoods and doing stupid stuff like that. Because ultimately it is stupid.
Yes, because that's what I said too. I mean, you're destroying your own property. And I've said it too. Stupid burn down neighborhoods. I told some guy one time. It was over there in Atlanta when the officer, that guy beat the guy up, and he turned around, and fired the taser, and the officer shot him in the back. And I said, quit shooting him in the damn back. I mean,
Well, obviously, I'm in the area, so I'm well familiar with that story. Here's the whole thing: don't detain a guy, semi-detain a guy for 45 minutes, badgering him, and getting you got to think, if you're sitting around there for 45 minutes with a cop talking to you, you're going to get a little bit agitated after a while, aren't you?
Yeah.
And it all goes back to the level of training and everything. And we're getting off the beaten path, but it all goes back.
Yeah, we'll go back to football in a second.
It's a whole lot of things that go into the issue, and as long as we don't deal with the issue, we're never going to fix. You're never going to solve it. And I guess bring it back to football, it's kind of like when Nick Saban was seeing his football team getting occasionally beat by lesser teams, inferior teams, because they were passing the ball all over the place and spreading them things out. What did Nick Saban do? He addressed the issue and said, you know what? We're not going to have at the worst case scenario, I'm going to be able to pass the ball all the way around. Because he would prefer to run it. He would prefer to have Najee Harris running for 3,000 yards.
Yeah, that was his baby. And I'm gonna say this, and then we'll get back to football. That thing happened over there in Atlanta, and I don't know how much you've ever been in Birmingham, but do you know what would have happened in Birmingham if that would have taken place?
What?
They would have called his sister, or they would have called an Uber to come pick him up and take him home. Because Birmingham, I know back in the 60s we had our problems, but for you to go to jail in Birmingham now, you have to commit a major felony. They ain't taking you to jail for being drunk. They ain't taking you to jail because you got a misdemeanor warrant out for your arrest. They ain't taking you to jail because you've got weed on you. They ain't taking you to jail for drunk and disorderly conduct. Like one told me, I've got way too much stuff to deal with than some guy to have a $20 bag of weed on him that is going to take me off the street for 3 hours to go deal with something like this when I can let him home. If that had been in Birmingham, there would have been an Uber called. That guy got put in the Uber. And I mean, one night I was leaving the bar and I was tore up. And as I got to the car, the cop said, "Stop, put your keys on top of the car." So I laid the keys on the top of the car. He goes, "Put your hands on top of the car." I put the hands on my top of the car, and there was a cab sitting over there. And he goes, "Where do you live?" And I said, "On Highland." He asked the cab driver, goes, "How much will you charge to take him home?" He said, $10. He said, "You can come back and get your keys tomorrow." And that's how it should have been handled.
That's how it all should be handled. But you know what and of course we get still off the beaten path. But that's what what that takes. That it takes an officer in that position, and there's some training there's some level of top-down control that's coming from the Birmingham Police Department, that's in the Birmingham Police Department, to say that's how you handle a situation like that. You de-escalate instead of escalate.
And I'll tell you who it comes from. Our chief police has been pretty good, but living on the South Side district is where our entertainment district is. The bars, obviously, you don't want to be giving a bunch of DUIs out to your bars. The chief of, or whatever it was there, they said that she used to tell her officers, there's a lot of crimes that's going out there. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff. She said, you got way too much bigger fit. He said, don't sweat the small stuff. All right, so let's go back to where we was at. So, Bama, Bama rolled through the SEC. Some of it was COVID, obviously. Some of it was just Bama being better.
Let me ask you, as a Bama fan, the only times that I really think Bama was tested, from my perspective, as a just viewing as a football fan, and not actually watching all the games. Obviously, the Ole Miss game, where I think that was you had to win that one late. But I think that was like the first or second game. How many games into the season was that?
It was about October, so it was about third game of the season. Because remember, the first couple ones that had to be played had to be canceled. But yes, that was one of the ones they got tested.
And then the Texas A&M, was the Texas A&M game?
They blew Texas A&M out pretty bad. It was, I think Texas A&M cut it late, but it was like 45 to Texas A&M ain't played Bama really tough since.
That's Manziel.
Well, Kevin Sumlin, when he was there, it was 20. I remember the score was 24-10, and the 12th man blocked the punt and made it 24-12. And then they drove down and scored and made it 24-19. And then Bama ended up winning, I think, 27-19. So, they made it respectable, but they've not played them well since Manziel.
Right. And then I remember watching the first half of the UGA game. It was close. But then Bama poured it on late.
All right, here's what happened in that game. And I was watching the stats, and the game was playing right into Georgia's hands. In the third quarter, Georgia had held the ball about 10 more minutes than Alabama did. Georgia had like 75 more yards rushing than Alabama did. And Georgia was keeping out, and Georgia, I think it was 24-20. They was keeping Alabama's offense on the sidelines. And Kirby does what he does every time he plays Alabama. He decides to get in a shooting match with Mac Jones. And there's a pass interference call down there when Georgia's driving, and it keeps Georgia out of the end zone. I think they missed a field goal. Alabama gets the ball, and they go back down the field, and it's almost comical because there's a pass in the end zone, and they go up, and they're chicken fighting over the ball, and play ends, and my friend's sitting there, and I go, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. There goes the yellow flag. It never fails. 8 seconds later, Alabama is going to get that call. So the game went from being, I think it was 24-20 to Georgia being down 34-24 in the second half.
I remember it got really ugly really quickly.
But Kirby kept running the ball. I think they was out physicaling Alabama. They was manhandling up front, and he stopped working, and he did that the first two games that he played against them. He was right.
And we'll get to our season preview next, I guess the next time we get together. But he hasn't had until potentially with JT Daniels, he's never had a quarterback who can actually. That's the thing. When Nick Saban didn't just flip that switch in the middle of a season or in the middle of a game. He actually had to tailor his recruiting towards getting, okay, I got to get me some gunslinging quarterbacks in order to play this style.
But see, I don't think Kirby wants that. I think Kirby still, and I still believe the game of football. I still believe that this type of football can win, where you line up and you put your hat on a hat and you out muscle people and you run the ball and just try to take their will. I still believe that football can win, as long as you're moving the chains and keeping them on the sidelines. Now there's one other game that Alabama got tested in, and I believe if they had 2 more minutes, Alabama would have lost, and that was Florida in that SEC championship game.
Now you really do, as a fan, you really do think that game was a fight.
The Florida game?
Yeah.
I think Florida came back and made it a fight because Alabama was up like 35-17 at half, and Alabama got complacent. And then when Alabama got complacent, and then you let them start believing they can win, and then suddenly you're in a fight. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a few years ago when Alabama was playing Oklahoma, and Alabama was up 28-0 at the start of the second quarter, and you're thinking Alabama's fixing to lay 100 on them, and then all of a sudden there it is, the start of the fourth quarter, and the game's 31-20, and now you're in a ball game.
Yeah. Now I do agree with you on that aspect, but the one reason why I don't consider that to be a real test is because I still think Alabama, and I know Saban wouldn't allow his players to say that or to feel that way, but I still feel that there was in the back of their minds or something, however way you want to describe it, there was still the belief that if even if they do take the lead, heaven forbid, even if they do take, we could just run down. If we
We're
need
gonna win.
to, well, yeah, if
Yeah.
we need to, we're going to do whatever it takes to win this game.
And I've seen that since Saban's first or second year that if they take the lead, we're going to win. I mean,
Mhm.
I can go back to you a couple years ago when it was I hadn't seen Alabama in a fight like this in a while, but Mississippi State led the whole game, and they're up 24-17 going in the fourth quarter. Alabama scores 2 touchdowns and beats them 31-24. I never thought Alabama was going to lose the game.
Mhm.
And I think that, I think that comes a lot from teams have been there before. They expect to win. Some
Winning,
teams hope.
winning DNA.
Some teams, and I said this. Some teams hope to win. Alabama expects to win. Now one team I'll tell you that is not intimidated at Alabama at all. Is Auburn.
Oh well, you can't be you can never be an Auburn player and be intimidated by Bama.
Auburn. You look at that idiot Malzahn. Okay, he went 3-5 against Saban. Their entire, there's 9 teams in the SEC that's never beat him 3 times, and he went 3-5 against them.
You know
And
what
that
Malzahn? You know what Malzahn's problem was? This is me. This is
okay.
what I think his problem was. He can't remember when Malzahn came into the SEC. He was supposed to be this wide open. He was supposed to be what Hugh Freeze turned out to be. He was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be the guy who's wide open, who's gonna spread things out. He's gonna be the offensive innovator. He's gonna be the guy who wins games 60-40. He's gonna be the guy who's lighting up the scoreboard. But he allowed. I really do think he allowed that the SEC mystique, this whole idea that you have to be strong, you have to be physical, you have to ground and pound. I think how you were saying that you wish that they could go back to the days where games were 10-7, things like that.
Well, I like those. I like those types
Right.
of games. Yeah.
And those games are good when you're actually like the LSU like the LSU Alabama game that ended up bringing about the playoff.
Yeah.
Where it was like I want to say it was like 14 to
9
something.
9-6.
Yeah, well 9-6. Yeah, when you actually have rosters full of future NFL All-Pro defensive players going up against each other, and that's beautiful to watch. But I really do think that Malzahn,
Well,
he came as a coach.
Malzahn, he had a spread offense, but he had a spread run offense. I mean, he would spread it out and he would run the ball. He'd have 350 yards rushing and 200 yards passing. But what Malzahn's problem was, and here's what I believe, is Malzahn would not adapt to his talent. I
Right.
mean, he had Stidham, a prototypical California drop back quarterback, out there trying to run a spread option. You don't put him in that. You put him in a drop back.
Well, you keep them in the same spread offense. Yeah, I think you keep them in the same spread offense, but instead of running it, you do what Oregon used to do because Oregon used to be able to switch from a Dennis Dixon to
Yeah.
I forget
Mariota.
Mariota, and they were able to okay, we run a little bit more this year with Dennis Dixon, but now that we got a guy who can throw the ball a little bit better, we throw the ball a little bit more. That's what you do. You don't do the same thing with the same quarterback that you did with the last quarterback. You adapt. You adapt to your personnel.
When you had it was really a 1-3-2-3 punch. I mean, I don't believe I've ever seen 3 quarterbacks on a team like Alabama had when they had Jalen and Mac Jones. I mean, you had 3 quarterbacks. I mean, if Jalen could not have made it when Tua went down, I would have had all the confidence in the world in Mac Jones. I know he was a freshman, but I mean, I'd watched him play. And I remember when I'll never forget, I almost got kind of misty eyed because I was like, this is so set up for him. And I can't wait for the Daniel Moore painting to come out. But when Tua went down, and Tua should have already been pulled because he was hurt. And a couple of my friends was like, oh, God, Tua went down. And I looked down and I said, I have all the confidence in the world that he is fixing to lead Alabama back and they're going to win this game. I said, there's not a doubt in my mind. I have all the confidence in the world in Jalen Hurts that he is going to win this game. I said, he's 27-2 as a starter. I said, he's got ice water running through his veins. He's going to win this game. And when he took off on his speed is so deceptive because he's not like really fast. It's almost like a horse galloping. And when he took off from that 28-yard line and he scored, I got misty-eyed because I was like, how perfect could it be? You lose your starting job after, being 27-2 and in the national championship game, and then to come back on and to lead them back in the same field against the same team. I mean, it was just great. And he's another one talking about character. He could have tore that team apart if he wanted to. I mean, to me that shows a lot of the character that his father had, because his father was a coach and his father told him, said, you got yourself in this mess, you got to get yourself out of it. And you never heard his father say a word. He never criticized the coaches. He told Jalen to go out there and be a team player, and that shows a testament to the character that his father had and that he had right there.
And you know what? I think it also shows it's a testament to it's a testament to Saban, because I guarantee you, Saban told him before that season started, look, you're going to get you've had your chance. We know what you can do, but it's Tua's time now. But we're going to work with you. You have a year in your pocket. You basically have a free year that you can do whatever you want to do after this season is over with. We're going to get because correct. You would know better. Was there an actual competition that year between them?
There was. I mean, there was a competition in the spring, and here's what I think the competition was about, is because it was obviously Tua that year was better. Now, that year that Jalen went and played at Oklahoma, that wouldn't mean quarterback's better, but it was obviously Tua was the better quarterback. But he had the competition in the spring, and if you remember, they played Louisville to start off with, and Saban rotated them, and he rotated them on purpose to show who was playing better and to show the team who the better quarterback was and who they needed to go with.
And you know what that reminds me of, and it goes back to what I said earlier about Saban, Dabo Swinney, Lincoln Riley, Ryan Day, and maybe Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart, the verdict is still out on him as far as what I'm about to say, but it just goes to show they are a cut above, because Dabo Swinney did the exact same thing with when Trevor Lawrence was a freshman. They had Kelly Bryant.
Kelly Bryant, yeah.
And Swinney lit Kelly Bryant. Kelly Bryant was the actual starter, but he was still kept Trevor Lawrence play, and he was doing that to show Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback. But he still wanted to let everybody else. He didn't want to embarrass Kelly Bryant, because Kelly Bryant was still doing good.
Right.
But he was still making it clear.
Jalen either. I mean, Jalen did a lot. And I love that little play they had too. I mean, because they had to drive defensive coordinators crazy when you had Tua out there and Jalen lined up in the slot. I mean, what are you going to do? You got a guy you can throw to. You got a guy who can run the ball. You got a guy who can run the verse. You got a guy that had to drive them absolutely insane. When they and you could tell when Saban, when he went off on that sideline performer lady, you could see just the stress in his face because he was afraid he was going to tear that team apart. But his, you know, the man he is, he held them together, and I mean, there'll never been another one like him. You know who? I'll tell you who my sleeper in the SEC is. Ole Miss.
If I haven't studied the schedules. I'm still waiting to get my Phil Steele book. But if their schedule lines up, because we can assume that Bama is going to they're going to have another 5-star quarterback and they're going to be just as well. They're going to have another crop of 4 or 5-star wide receivers and they're just going to keep on rolling. But if Bama slips up, why not Ole Miss? Because I like them better. I like their chances better than LSU without Brady, without the guy who's in Carolina now. Because that basically bought Ed Ogeron a couple of years.
I think he bought him one more year. If he has the year he did like he did last year, they'll fire him.
Yeah, because he's basically Gene Chizik with an accent.
I was just fixing to say the exact same thing. And getting beat 50-something to Alabama and 50-something to Auburn, that national championship's gone. He does that. He does 3-7. You can forget him. But I think that, and I think that my personal opinion is that Kiffin was only about our age, 43 or 44.
Yeah.
I think what Kiffin's doing is he's going to try to get there, grab him a couple 9 and 10 win seasons, then get him one more shot at a big time job.
You think so?
Yeah, I don't see him staying in Oxford the rest of his life. I see him trying to get a couple big win seasons and try to get him somewhere, another big job.
Let me ask you this: if he gets around to actually beating Alabama, everybody always talks about Dabo Swinney. You think Kiffin might, because did he win a national title? Was he the coordinator for the title winning team? Did he win a title as a coordinator?
Yes.
Okay, so they lost it the year that he was just an analyst, and then they won it the year that he was the coordinator.
So the first year he was the coordinator, they won the SEC championship with Blake Sims, and so they lost in the playoffs. Then when they had Jake Coker, they won the national championship. And then he was the offensive coordinator when they had Jalen, and Saban got pissed at him and made him an analyst, and they lost.
And that's he got the Florida Atlantic job, and then he said that he was going to stay for the national championship, but then I think Saban did get pissed off at him for something.
Well, what happened was he started showing up late to practice and late to meetings and stuff like that, and Saban got mad. Here's my thinking on Dabo. You're Dabo Swinney. You're coaching at Clemson. By the time Saban retires, you've been up there 10 or 15 years. You've won 4 or 5 national championships. They've got statues built after you. They got streets named after you. Why are you going to leave Clemson and follow Nick Saban and go play in the SEC West when you're playing Wake? I mean, that's that.
Oh yeah,
he's not coming to Alabama.
Yeah. That's why I say I don't think so at all. That I was just mentioning that he's the obvious one that everybody always points to.
Yeah.
Do you think they would go to Lane Kiffin if he has some success at Ole Miss and he has the pedigree? He already has the link to Alabama.
That's a tough one because Kiffin has mellowed over the. You think about Kiffin at 32, what a cocky, arrogant ass he was then. I'm not going to say it's outside the realm of possibility because let's say Saban retires, in 3 years. Who would you go get?
Yeah, if he has some success, I'm saying Lane
I
Kiffin to
mean,
me is the perfect candidate.
Because not if he's had some success, and let's think about it. He did coach up under Saban, which is big, and he's had success running major programs. I mean, including USC. So, yeah, I mean, I could say. I mean, who would you? I mean, they're not going to hire um, a assistant to take over the job
Mm-hmm.
at Alabama.
You have to hire someone who's ready to handle what comes with being the head coach at the University of Alabama.
Not too many people can handle that, but I think he could.
And one thing, I'm glad that you put it as he had success, because a lot of people look at the U.S. A lot of people, even going back to him with the Raiders, they look at every job that he's been at, and they downplay they down him, because obviously he left Tennessee after 1 year. He got fired getting off the airplane at USC, and that doesn't look good. But in hindsight, what has
Yeah,
USC done since he got fired?
and you got to think about it. When he took the job at USC, they had just lost 25 scholarship players. So, you know, he was on major probation. They pointed out at the Raiders thing. Whoever wins at the Raiders,
And
Al
that was
Davis has
and that
to
was
go.
still Al Davis.
The tennis. I know they went 7-5 that year, and I think Butch Jones had a couple 9-4s. But that 7-5 team was the best team Tennessee's had since he's been there.
They were
Um,
what, a field goal away from beating
Alabama,
Bama.
Bama had to block 2 field goals.
Mm-hmm.
Mount Cody did. He won 1 or 2 championships down there at Florida Atlantic. I know it's not the same, so he's won championships. He coached up under the best. And another thing he's got going for him, he still will be relatively young.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you this right here, and this would be an outside of the box, and it depends on really how long Saban coaches, because he's getting kind of, I think he's in his early 50s. Urban Meyer,
Going to Bama.
yeah,
He'll have a heart attack he'll have a heart attack before his first press conference. He's not
he's
he
not.
no, I'm really curious to see how he's going to handle Jacksonville being in the NFL, but I know he's not ready. Florida is a big time program, and Ohio State is a big time program, but those are also big time programs where you can basically, you can you think about it, if Florida really had gotten scrutinized the way that they should have gotten scrutinized while he was there, he probably wouldn't have been able to deal with that stress.
Oh
And
no,
Ohio State, nobody's messing with Ohio State in the state of Ohio. In Alabama, where you have a school that's just about as big as you, that has its own set of partisans that are willing to burn down oak trees and do whatever to get it back at you, he's going to have, and plus just the stress that comes with being the University of Alabama head football coach.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize, and you have an appreciation of it, being outside of the state. You'll hear our Auburn fans, talk about stuff. You in Alabama, you are the most powerful man in the state. I mean, everything revolves around the head coach, and you've got so much on you. I read an article one time. They said it was Saban's second day on the job, and they sent a courier over and from Mal Moore and told Saban that Mal Moore said to be in his office at 2:00. Saban was right, and he looked up at the courier and he told him, he said, if Mal Moore won't see me, tell him to be in my office at 2:00.
Yeah, I can see, but now this goes back. Yeah, you are right. You are the most powerful man in the state. But now I'm gonna throw a little bit of history at you, and you probably
Mhm.
you're a knowledgeable. I know you probably know where I'm going at with this. You
I
know who
know.
is, right?
Huh?
You know who Huey Long was, right?
Oh yeah, the kingfish.
The kingfish. But now, when he was alive, who was the most powerful man in the state of Louisiana?
Uh, and when he was alive, the most powerful man in the state of Louisiana in the 30s.
What
So wouldn't have been Huey Long.
it would have been.
Um,
That's what I'm saying. It would have been Huey Long.
oh,
Wouldn't you?
okay. I thought you. Oh, never mind. Okay, I thought you was trying to. I thought you was throwing a trick question at me there.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
yeah.
But Huey
Okay.
Long
Yeah.
was the most powerful man in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
But
Okay. I thought you when you said that about the Huey Long the Kingfish and who was most powerful. I thought you. Sorry, I thought you was throwing a curveball at me. And I was trying to think. Well, who else would be more powerful than him?
it was a straight fastball right down the middle of the plate. But now, like I said, Huey Long was the most powerful man in Louisiana. But at the end of the day, what happened to Huey Long?
He got
He still,
shot.
he still had somebody who was willing to shoot him. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm saying about that. That's I guess that's what I'm saying is the difference between being and you can say any one of these big southern schools, Alabama, I'll put Tennessee in the same boat, Georgia, not really Florida, but any one of those schools, LSU. No, not LSU because they don't really have a big rival, and they don't really have a big SEC rival.
Alabama.
Well, not in the state. In the state, that's what I'm talking about. In the
Oh,
state,
you're talking about in-state rivals. In-state
yeah,
rivals. Yeah.
and not even Tennessee because Vanderbilt's not. Well, really, that's what I'm saying. Alabama is unique in that they have that big in-state SEC rival that yeah, Alabama, the head coach at Alabama is the most powerful single man in the state of Alabama. But
And I like if Ole Miss and Mississippi State, they got a pretty good, and, yeah.
but they're not. Neither one of
No,
those are
on that level.
Alabama's
And
level. But
that's what's so amazing. Two states that size, and especially more so with Alabama and Auburn, because Alabama is ranked the number one job in America, or maybe two now, and Auburn's ranked the 13th job. And to have a state with 5 million people, and you've got two of the top 15 jobs in America, I mean that says a lot about football. Um, do you think Tennessee will ever come back? I mean, you're talking about 17 years now that I think they're beginning to become like Nebraska and Miami that they'll never be back.
You know what? This is gonna answer your question. I don't even know who is the head coach at Tennessee right now. Right now, at this very moment, who is the head coach at Tennessee?
He was the guy who was at Central Florida. I can't think of his name, but he was in Central Florida and he beat Auburn a couple years ago. He got hired. The athletic director at Central Florida got hired, and he hired him to be the head coach. But that shows you.
But yeah, the fact that I mean, now that you said it, I remember. But the fact that it was just that far off of my radar that I didn't even know off the top of my head, because I can pretty much name every coach in America right now.
Yeah, me too. I can name most of the assistants.
Yeah, but the fact that it was so far off my radar, I think Tennessee is permanently. I think Tennessee right now they're competing. They have a real. There's a very real danger that they are now competing with Vanderbilt just to be fifth in the SEC East.
Oh, they are
to
me. They are already the Vanderbilt in Kentucky. I mean, they are to me right now.
Kentucky's past them.
Oh, Kentucky's way past them. Yeah. Kentucky's way past. To me, right now, I mean, if I had to pick, it's a toss-up. Vanderbilt and Tennessee's the worst teams.
Yeah, like I said, Tennessee will always have the advantage over Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt. It's hard to get kids into Vanderbilt, but a good coach, like if they can manage to get another, the guy at Penn State, if they can manage to get another version of him, and who wants to stay at Vanderbilt. If they can manage to hold on to somebody like that for about 10 years, and then when he finally goes on to another job, there's like a succession in place.
Well, do
where
you
they
remember the guy who kind of laid the foundation for him before he came there?
Johnson.
Johnson, Bobby Johnson. He ended up having that 8-4 season, and he kind of laid the foundation there. He kind of course, it kind of reminds me. Well, South Carolina always had some decent teams, but people forget Lou Holtz laid the foundation for Steve Spurrier.
Yep. Like
And
if it wasn't for the abrupt way that Steve Spurrier left that year, where I think he just got tired of coaching, and he literally just quit in the middle of the season. Well, matter, I don't even think it was the middle of the season. I think it was just right after the Georgia game.
He was 2-4 when they quit.
2-4. Okay, so it was the middle of the season. But yeah, if it wasn't for the abrupt way that he quit, if he had have actually, if they had had a nice succession plan in place, that's why a succession plan in place to where they could have kept some of the momentum going. South Carolina would be doing a whole lot better than it. But even with Shane Bieber right now, I think South Carolina is a much better job than Tennessee.
Like absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a couple. They're beginning to make a little bit of comeback now, but a couple years ago, I thought, how did Arkansas fall this bad? Because Arkansas is a team with, obviously they're not in Alabama or Auburn or Georgia or somebody like that, but they have a tradition. I mean, they won games. They won a national championship. They went to 3 SEC Western championships. They won Southwestern Conference. That was a team that had a proud tradition. Better than a lot of teams. And I didn't know how they got to that level. I don't know why Bielema left Wisconsin and went to Arkansas. I mean, that was the stupidest move I'd ever seen.
It was because he apparently Wisconsin. And you would never think it because you would think Wisconsin is just this big state school that they just let anybody in. But apparently they have pretty high academic standards. And he was having a hard time getting, because you always look at Wisconsin, they always have this reputation for being this ground and pound team that, just they have
I love that.
But apparently that's founded in apparently they do that because it's hard to get the great athletes into Wisconsin because of the academics aspect. And that's what Bielema thought that he could come down to art. And I do think that if he had been given more, what they should have, because who did he replace? Who did he replace at Arkansas?
He replaced John L. Smith had came back after
was the Petrino, right?
Yeah, Petrino had went off doing whatever he was doing with his secretary, and then John L. Smith. And John L. Smith made a stupid decision because I guess he thought that team was a lot better it was, and he had a chance for a national championship. But John L. Smith had went back to his alma mater and took the head coaching job. And then when that came open, he left and went back. And I was like, you should have stayed at your alma mater.
Well, yeah, and I had to. I wasn't sure if there was somebody in between, but yeah, if it was the Petrino mess that Bielema was cleaning up, their problem was not committing to a full tear down and because you see what's going on at Louisville. They're 3 years removed from having a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who was away from winning a national championship or competing for a national championship.
I mean, they have probably, to me, one of the greatest. I don't know if I want to say quarterback, but greatest athletes that I've ever seen, who can run and throw the ball 70 yards on a dime and just unbelievable. I did not realize Lamar Jackson was that good in college until I seen him in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And I was like, he was just a phenomenal player. Like
I said, they were legitimately, I don't remember if it was the first season or the second season, but they were, that game that they lost, that I want to say it was like they lost to Clemson on a
they did lose to Clemson.
They lost to Clemson, but they were legit. They were in the red zone, and I want to say it was like he threw the pass, and the guy was like short of the end zone, And if they had scored that touchdown and won that game, obviously the rest of their season, I think they ended up losing like another game or two. But I am 99.9% sure that if they had won that game, they would have been in the playoff instead of Clemson that year.
Well, sometimes a game, losing a game, changes your whole season.
It does.
I mean,
100%.
In 2013, Auburn lost to LSU 21 to. Oh, I forgot what the final was, but I think Auburn was down 21-0 at half, and Auburn came back and made it like 21-13. Auburn lost the game, but they won more in losing than what they did in winning because that team came together and they went on and played for the national championship. We've covered. All right, so your pick for the SEC West this year, I guess, Alabama.
Like I said, I'm going to say Alabama just because I'm just assuming that the machine is going to keep on rolling. But I want to put in a sleeper. I want to say Ole Miss as a sleeper.
Who?
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss would be my sleeper too. All right. The SEC East. Who's your team?
My heart wants to say Florida, but my head has to say UGA.
All right.
Well, let me rephrase that. My heart wants to say anybody but UGA, but my head has to say UGA.
All right. Who would your sleeper be?
If they have to be a sleeper, it would be Florida. I think that I'm 100% sure Georgia's going to win, but if I had to pick somebody else, it would be Florida.
My pick for the East is going to be Florida. My sleeper.
Your 100% pick.
My 100%. Florida's in the SEC championship game against Alabama.
Really?
Yep. My sleeper is Kentucky.
I like that pick.
Okay, so let's go to. I'm gonna stay away from all of the southern UABs and those kind of schools.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go. I'm gonna
ACC.
That's what I was fixing to say. So this year's, let's go to the ACC. All right. Clemson.
It's got to be Clemson.
It's got to be.
I will say this.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you.
I'm not sure that they go to the playoff because while I'm sure that they win the ACC, I'm not sure that they beat UGA, and I'm not sure that they don't lose another game within the ACC.
And if my sleeper for the ACC is North Carolina.
I like that pick. I 100% like that pick. I would say I agree with your pick. I would toss in as another sleeper, Miami.
I agree with that too because it seems like he's putting them. He's beginning to get them back together. If they just go back and do what Howard Snellenberger and wrap down. What he say? All we got to do is just lock down Broward and Miami County and
Miami.
Yeah, Miami-Dade County and Broward, and he said that's all we got to do.
Mm.
I bet he could kick himself leaving Miami and taking that job.
That is one of the great. That's a lot of what ifs on the Killer Angels. That is one of the great what ifs of sports, is because you think about the butterfly effect of that decision, of how much it affected other schools and the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. If Jimmy Johnson doesn't go to Miami and become a bigger name coach than what he would have been at Oklahoma State, who does Jerry Jones hire to coach Miami the Dallas Cowboys?
And I mean, who even what if Jerry Jones doesn't even buy them?
Maybe not.
And think about something else. I mean, when you go to Butterfly Facts, Dennis Erickson.
That's it.
I mean, and now think about this right here. He had won his national championship, and Miami had a 20-year run where they won 4 national championships. If he would have stayed there, he could have had a run reminiscent of Bryant's run from the 60s and 70s. I mean, he could have had 4 or 5 national championships.
Well, you think about it. You think about this now. He was hired at Miami in what was it the late 70s, or was it like 80, 81, late 70s?
That national championship game was for the 83 season, so it was late 70s, maybe 80, late 70s, yeah, something like that.
He's hired at Miami only a couple of years after Bobby Bowden is hired at Florida State. And if I'm not mistaken, he ends up retiring from Florida was it Florida Atlantic or Florida International? Whichever one that he was at. He was at one of those.
One of them, yeah. He was about 80-something years old, retired from there, yeah.
Well, he wasn't that old. But that's what I'm saying is that he's basically the same age as Bobby Bowden.
Well, Bowden, when he retired, Bowden was 84.
Was he? Was he that old?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Bowden was 80. Yeah. Because let's see. Wait a second. No. Bowden was when Bowden retired, he was 80. Because Paterno was 84.
Paterno was yeah, I can see. But yeah, so you think about it, he's basically along the same line as Bobby Bowden. So if he stays imagine if he stays at Miami that entire time instead of bouncing.
What a rivalry you would have had between those two guys for the next 20 years. Now, I don't know if you know this story right here, but you want to talk about butterfly effect. It was in 1987. Bobby Bowden had went out to it was no, let's see, yeah, it was 86. 86. It was after the 86 season. Bowden was only about 56, 57 years old then. He had went out and played in the All-American Bowl out in Legion Field. Mm-hmm. He had been promised by the University of Alabama president that he had the Alabama job. Governor-elect Guy Hunt told him that he was the next Alabama coach.
Tell me that they chose. I love Bob Kurt. I forget his first name, but I love Kurt. You know who I'm talking about. I love him to death. But please don't tell me that they chose him above Bobby Bowden.
So let me just tell you. So the president told Bobby Bowden he had the job. The governor of the state told him he had the job. The athletic director told him he had the job. So Bowden gets in the car. They're driving over to this hotel, and they told Bowden he's just going in there to sign the contract and be on his way, and he could go out and resign. Bowden walks into an interview room with 15 people lined up, ready to ask him questions. And Bobby Bowden turned around and walked out.
Okay, that's a little bit better.
And withdrew his name to consideration because they had promised him the job, told him he'd had the job, and he walked into an interview room. And when he seen that he was fixing to be interviewed room, he walked out, and they picked Bill Curry over Ferguson. And I'm one of the Alabama fans that, he was hated, but I liked when he was. I liked Curry, but when you think back, that was right before Florida State was really becoming dominant.
Want to say it was when it was like in the middle of the start of their run.
Yeah, it was
They
like it
hadn't
was
really,
right at the right at the beginning. Now, can you imagine bringing Bobby Bowden to Alabama and what kind of run he would have set up over the next 15 years?
oh yeah, that would have been he.
I mean, that was the perfect fit. I mean, I was like, how did you not get him? And and then they got and they picked Curry, and and that was the thing. So think about the butterfly effect. Then, if they hired Bowden, then Terry Bowden never would have got the job at Auburn. Bill Curry would have been a lifer at Georgia Tech.
Yes, and
And
we probably don't have our only back bragging rights against Georgia having won the last national championship in the state.
that was man. Was that in 90 or 91?
I want to say it was 90. It was 91 for the 90 season.
Because I always get it confused because I know they got it that year, and then Colorado had the fifth down the next year when they was playing Missouri, and they got
No, that was the year we split it with Colorado.
y'all split it with Colorado. So
Yeah,
Colorado,
and
so y'all should have won it outright then.
then the
'Cause
next
I think both of y'all was
Washington
9-1-1 if I remember, and
yeah, Colorado was 9-1-1. We were 10-0-1.
10-0-1. Okay, and Colorado got the fifth down because I mean that was a good Georgia Tech team. Um, I mean Bobby Ross. I mean he did a great job because I always liked Tech. For some reason, and I don't know what the rivalry goes back, but supposedly one of the reasons when they hated Curry was the Alabama faithful hated Georgia Tech for some reason. But it used to be a big rival when Georgia Tech and Alabama played in
Well,
the
they were both Alabama and Georgia Tech were were their mutual number two rivalries because Georgia Tech was a bigger rivalry back then when they were in the SEC. They were a bigger rivalry for Alabama than Tennessee was. I mean, Tennessee was still a big rivalry, but and of course Auburn wasn't as big of a rivalry as it has grown into be.
well, you got to remember, Alabama and Auburn, they didn't play for 40 something years.
Was it for? Did they not play? I thought it was that Alabama would never go to Auburn.
Well, that was part of it, but I forgot exactly what happened was that started it, but it was in 1907, and something happened between the two teams, and they had a fight, and they didn't play for 47 or 48 years, and the legislature and the governor had to get them together and make them play.
Wow.
And then, then it came down to a thing that Alabama refused to go to Auburn. Bryant said he would never go to Auburn, and I don't know why, but, Bryant said that, and then they had Dye there. Now, tell you an interesting story, and then we'll go on to the next one. When Dye got hired at Auburn, they said Bryant called him, and he said, what in the hell do you think you're doing? and Dye, that old Southern coach, that old Southern voice said, well, Coach, he said, I'm taking his Auburn job if they hire me. And Bryant told him, he said, you're not taking that job. He said, you're getting this job. And he said, Coach, he said, I'm not getting that job. He said, there's too many people that played there and has too many ties to me. And he goes, well, let me tell you something, you son of a bitch. He said, I'm going to beat you every year you play. And Dye told him, he said, well, hell, Coach, you ain't going to live forever.
That sounds great.
That was another funny
great. That's one of those great Southern college football stories.
Oh, I mean, it was so great. I don't know if you ever seen some of the Bama Bama moments, but they said Mal Moore was they was playing University of Houston when they ran the old split back veer, and it was I think final score was 38-28, and they had the ball down. Alabama was dead on their goal line, and Bryant told Mal, said, Mal, run the reverse. And Mal called a play and popped out about 10 yards. And Coach Bryant said, Mal, the backside linebacker's killing you. Run the reverse. Mal called another play and popped out about 35-yard line. And Bryant said, God, Mal, he said, the backside linebacker made the play. Run the reverse. And he said they popped it back up about the midfield. And he said, and Coach Bryant grabbed him by the arm, and he knew he meant what he said. And he said, run the reverse. So he said he went load 35 wide. He rode that big fullback, and he gave it to David Bailey coming around the end. He said the big O end for Houston was give out and didn't pursue. And he said he called him and threw him for about 15 yards, and they hit the ground right in front of Bryant and Mal Moore, and they was both backing up, and they looked at each other, and Bryant said, no, I meant the other way.
You reversed it the wrong way.
And one first one too, we're going to another one. They said they was out there scratching prep practicing one day, and they'd won on about 45 minutes, and John Hannah was telling this story. He said they was walking off the field. He said Bryant was up in his tower, and he said the horn fell off and hit him on the leg and woke him up, and he said, all right, boys, let's take it in. He said Musso looked at Hannah and said, God damn, I'm glad he didn't die up there. We never got off the field. but there was a bunch of funny ones that I can go on. I'll just have to tell stories one day about some of their jokes they had out there, but there were some funny ones out there.
Oh, yeah.
Di asked, I'll tell you this, and then we'll go on up to the next one. Di got the job at Auburn on one thing. They sat there, and Di was in the interview room, and they asked Di, they said, how long will it take you to beat Alabama? And he said, 60 minutes.
That's probably the best one right there.
That was.
And that's exactly like Pat Dye.
Yeah, look, and I've talked about this to 100 people. And you know how Dye looked and how he talked and how he walked. He would have been the exact perfect fit at Alabama. Mm-hmm. If there had been a couple, because the first guy would have got fired. They always going to get fired after Legend. If Dye could have came behind that guy, he would. And I have no problem with Stallings. I love Gene Stallings, but Dye looked like him. Dye drank. Dye, smoked. Dye would have been the one that would have been, the coach out there. And another coach I want to touch on 1 second that before we go on up there that I feel bad for is that Sylvester Croom got screwed by Alabama. They did him wrong. He deserved that job. I was glad to see him become first black coach in the SEC because talk about character. Croom was a man of character, and he loved Bryant, but the way Alabama did him wrong. He deserved that job, and I wished he would have got it.
Who was he fired? Who was he not hired in favor of? Was that Shula or DeBoe? Okay, DeBoe, Shula.
Yeah. They hired him over in Shula, and Sly came out of there thinking he had the job. He thought he interviewed well, and the way they talked to him, Sly thought he had the job. Mal Moore wanted to hire Richard Williamson, who was up in his 60s then, but Sly thought he had the job, and I he couldn't have done any worse. He couldn't do any worse than Shula did.
I was just about to say I hate the fact that he hasn't gotten any, and I don't know the particulars of it, why he hasn't gotten any other jobs since then. But I looking at how things went at Mississippi State, obviously Mississippi State ain't Alabama, so and it's harder to win at Mississippi State. But I'm not certain that he would have. I'm not certain that he would have been as successful at Alabama as. Because Mike Shula did Mike Shula have any losing?
Mike
I know he
Shula,
had a
Mike Shula's first year when he came in there with Price and they was on probation, Shula went 3-9, and then
okay,
the next year they went 6-6, but Brody Kroll hurt his leg the second game of the season. And then the third year, Shula went 10-2, and
hmm
they went up to be 9-1. And then Alabama was hit by major probations. The fourth year, Shula went 6-6, and they fired him. And
and that's when they lost the bowl game to finish 6-7.
yeah, but Shula coach, and you're probably right about that because I mean Alabama. Sly would have had a hard time in a black coach at Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just, I'm surprised as bad as, the way Mississippi is, he didn't have a hard enough time there, but, Sly would have had a hard time. I think Auburn would come closer to hiring a black head coach than Alabama would.
I can see. I would definitely see that because Auburn is the so-called second school, and the second
Yeah.
school, just like Mississippi State in Mississippi. Mississippi is the second school of Mississippi, so they would be the one to do something like that.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I'm like I said, I do think it's bad that he has, because that's what I always say about black head coaches across college football, across the entire spectrum of college football, is that bad as it is for a black head coach to get hired the first time, it's almost. I'm not. I don't want to say it's almost impossible because we've seen Kevin Sumlin basically, but I don't really think that Kevin Sumlin actually got fired at Texas A&M. I think that was just a situation where Jimbo Fisher became available, so Texas A&M fired Sumlin. But if Jimbo hadn't been available, I think they would have kept him on.
Maybe, but someone had a lot of talent there. He had all those quarterbacks, and there's something. He's turning in those 7-5s, and there's something, and it's not just Sumlin because it goes back for years and years and years with R.C. Slocum and some of these other guys. It's almost like Texas A&M is a fool's errand. You've got the premier fertile recruiting ground, a TV market, a rapid fan base. I don't understand how you can't win 10, 11 games at Texas A&M. I just don't understand that.
Because you know what I suspect the problem is with Texas A&M is that Texas A&M, R.C. Slocum was a good coach.
Yeah, R.C. was.
Kevin Sumlin, you could say, was a good coach. Jimbo Fisher might be a great, and obviously the verdict is still out on him. Jimbo Fisher might end up being a great coach. I mean, obviously he's won a national championship, so Jimbo Fisher might go down as a great coach. But for right now, I'm just going to say he's a good coach. But you notice what I'm saying here? They've had good coaches. They haven't had a great coach yet.
I agree with you totally that the verdict is way out on Jimbo. Jimbo won a national championship, so did Chiswick.
Yeah.
I mean, but you look at what Jimbo's turned out there. Jimbo's, he ran Florida State's program into the ground.
Yep.
And Jimbo out there, he's going into his fourth or fifth season, and they didn't pay him $75 million guaranteed to come out and get blowed out by Alabama by 4 touchdowns every year. You're going to have to beat, if you're going to make it in the SEC, you're going to have to beat Alabama and win an SEC championship. That's just all there is to it. Or you're not going to be there.
You're going to have to, you can pretty much, if you beat Alabama, you should be, you win the SEC, you win the SEC and you go to the playoff. That's pretty much guaranteed.
You would think so, but those 2 years that Ole Miss beat Alabama, they ended up 9-4.
Well, yeah, now that is true. That is true.
And the 1 year they really should have went to the. I don't know if they made it to the playoffs or not, but the year they should have went to the SEC championship game, I've never seen a play this crazy for my life. is when it was 4th and whatever, and they throw the ball, and a guy fumbles it, and a 400-pound lineman picks the ball up, and he's running down the field, and he's about to get tackled, and just hurls it over the back of his head, and it bounces into the fastest player on the Arkansas team, and he runs untouched down the field and scores a touchdown, and then Arkansas goes for 2 and wins. I mean, how does that happen? And that kept them out.
I remember what Mississippi Ole Miss had a couple of fluky plays in that time era, because I don't know if it was against Alabama or Auburn or LSU. Didn't they have like one crazy touchdown play where they were flipping the ball all up? Might have been once Alabama actually beat them, but it was
they had a play against Alabama, and for some reason the game didn't start until almost 9:00. And that was the year I don't know what the hell Alabama was thinking, but they came out and they started Blake Barnett over Coker, and Alabama was suddenly down 30-3, and they put Coker back in, and he led them back on this just fanatical drive. But Ole Miss had threw a pass, and like 7 players tipped the ball until one guy finally caught it and ran. And then there was another play that Alabama should have got called penalty on, and Alabama really should have lost this game worse, but an Ole Miss player caught the kickoff, and an Alabama player grabbed him by the face mask and jerked his face mask down and knocked the ball out of his hand and scooped it up, and they went in and scored. I've seen some I've seen some crazy ones. I did think I don't even think the kick 6 is the craziest play I've ever seen. Because I've seen that before. I think that play, one of the craziest I've seen. Well, that play at Ole Miss was the craziest I've ever seen. I mean, it was just I've never seen anything like that before.
The kick 6 in retrospect, the kick 6 is almost it's especially since teams have started to do it more. The kick 6 was just it was just a big thing at the time, just because we hadn't really seen it before at that point. But now that everybody knows to look out for it.
I think it had happened 3 times before, but it was in lower level games that nobody ever paid attention to. Mm-hmm. And if you'll go back and watch that, and they didn't tell them anything, but you can watch those big fat slobs for Alabama. They're just jogging down the field, just watching that guy, just like deer in headlights. And Chris Davis hits that corner. I mean, it was just like, them fat slobs just watching it.
Yeah, but it's kind of like you are nowadays. You think about because everybody does it now. When there's a long field goal attempt, you put a fast guy on there, and if you can return it, you return it. But at the time, nobody thought about it, but that was just it makes so much sense, because you have all these fat, like you said, them fat sloppy guys just they're all on there for the kick. But then if he can actually field it and return it, guess who? Ain't nobody catching him on that football field.
Oh, no. And people were criticizing Saban, why was he kicking a field goal? Well, why are you not going to try to kick a field goal to win the game? I mean, who the hell do you think is going to catch the ball and run it, 110 yards for a touchdown?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that game tied, or did they have the lead?
That game was tied.
Yes. Yeah, you're Saban. You're thinking about it. There's probably because like I said, you see it all the time. I mean, I've seen it to where they put the guy back there to field the kick, but the kick goes wide right, the kick goes wide left. It never does it happen where the kick just goes straight to the guy, and he just get a full head.
It was towards the left side of the field where he got down there and got to the sidelines, and once he hit those sidelines and those fat sloppy guys, it was just, it was over. I mean, and now the thing that I blame Saban on, and it was stupid, stubborn Saban, is Alabama kept missing those extra points. Well, when Alabama got the ball down there, it was about uh, 13, 14, 15 minutes to play. And Alabama had the ball, 4th and goal on the 1 yard line. Fourth and goal on the 9 yard line. Alabama had already missed 4 field goals, and Saban goes for it. And I'm like, the law of averages, you're going to get one, okay? Try it.
Right.
But he'll do some, stuff like that. But I've seen him pull off some good ones. Because I'll tell you what the best move, one of the best moves he ever made. If you remember back in the first time they beat Clemson in that national championship game, Alabama had just tied the score 24-24, and Saban called an onside kick. But my eye could feel it. Clemson had the momentum, and if he hadn't kicked that onside kick, they would have beat Alabama.
Yep.
So so we've covered the ACC. I don't see Florida State being back. The program is just. I've heard their facilities are so bad that.
You mentioned you mentioned that you had mentioned that Jimbo Fisher ran. I mean, it was Jimbo as the head coach should have been more proactive, and he should have been more energetic in getting his team and getting these things taken care of. But they have dropped the ball from an administrative standpoint at Florida State, and I do think it's going to be a while before Florida State's back. If they ever get back.
If they ever get back, because with so many Florida teams coming up now, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you've seen a Florida State do it, you've seen a Florida do it, you've seen a Miami do it. Who's to say a Central Florida or a Florida Atlantic or a Florida or one of those teams could rise up and be the next Florida State?
Here's the thing, and we'll probably we'll probably have to touch on it more in detail when we do this again. Mm-hmm. The playoff, if they approve it as it has been proposed, the new playoff system, if you're Central Florida or you're South Florida, you win that American Conference, and you go 10-1, 11-0. There's a good chance. There's a 50% chance that you're probably going to be the top group of 5 conference champion. You're going to finish ahead of Appalachian State, and who knows what Boise State is going to do now. But there's a good chance you're going to finish above. You're going to finish out at the top out of those groups. But then who's to say you don't finish better than the Pac-10 champion?
I don't have a problem with that because I remember a couple of years ago when they beat Auburn, Central Florida did, and they manhandled Auburn, and that was after Auburn had just got through manhandling Alabama and Georgia.
Yes,
and I got to thinking about something. The way those playoffs would have lined up, if Auburn would have beat Georgia in that SEC championship game, Auburn's last 4 games would have been Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, can you imagine Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama? All right, so let's go. Big 12.
With the rest of it, because we covered the SEC and the ACC, you pretty much got the. Do you see anybody competing with Ohio State out of the Big Ten? That's really the question that you have to ask out of that league.
I'm torn. I could see Penn State, but my dark horse, who I believe has a chance to actually win this thing, is Iowa.
I was reading something the other day, and when you think about it, it makes sense because I was always there, but they're always there, but you never really think about them because they don't actually. But I want to say Iowa has like the 10th best record in the playoff era, like the 10th best overall record. Because you've had teams, because obviously you've got Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia, who have pretty much been throughout the entire playoff era, they've not lost more than 2 games a season. But then
Right.
think about it, you got Wisconsin because Wisconsin was in there, Penn State was in there too. And Penn State's only issue is that they lose to Ohio State every year, except for the 1 year where they beat them, and then Ohio State still went into the playoffs. But then Iowa, like I said, I want to say Iowa was like number 10 because they, however many teams the list was counting down, Iowa was the last team on that list, and it was like you never would have imagined. It might have just been the Power 5 teams, but
Well,
yeah,
here's what really impressed me last year with Iowa is when they played Ohio State. They were undefeated, and everybody said, Iowa's going to go in, and Iowa's going to turn into Iowa. And Ohio State jumped up 42-10 or something like that. And then next thing you know, the game's 42-37. And that showed.
Are you thinking about? Are you sure you're thinking about? Are you thinking about Indiana?
Sorry, Indiana.
Okay, yeah. Indiana, yeah, because I remember that. I remember turning off that game because I was excited for it because I thought Indiana could actually, which they ended up doing. I was excited to see Indiana play Ohio State, and then Ohio State, like you said, they jumped up on them real big. So I turned that. I don't remember what I turned. Georgia Tech might have turned it to the Georgia Tech game or whoever it was. But then I saw the second half saw a score flash up and said they were back in it. And matter of fact, I want to say it was like a 1-score game. And I had to turn
they had got it down to, it was either 42-38 or something like that. And they had Ohio State pinned inside like the 5-yard line with about 6 minutes to go, and they couldn't get a stop. And that showed me right then that they came out shell-shocked because they wasn't ready for it. And then once they got shell-shocked, that team was as good as them, and I believe that they could do it.
I agree, and if I'm not mistaken, because I don't know what effect COVID had on the schedule. They should, because I want to say that game was at Ohio State last year.
It was at Ohio State.
Oh, and that they should be at Indiana this year. And if I'm not mistaken, the quarterback who was originally their starting quarterback, who had gotten hurt, if I'm not mistaken, he should be back. He should be back this season. So yeah, I think Indiana they are kind of like, and I guess it's kind of makes sense because they're basketball rivals. They are kind of like the Kentucky of the Big Ten, and that they're that basketball school, but they made a good hire in Tom Allen, and they have slowly but surely made themselves into the kind of team that Michigan is supposed to be, and that they are a legit. Now talent wise, they're still going to lose a couple of other games too, but just when it comes down to Michigan, back when they actually had some talent. Michigan under Harbaugh has never felt like they wanted to beat Ohio. They've never. I don't believe that those players have actually felt that they could beat Ohio State, and I think that's the main difference.
I wonder.
They think they can beat them.
I would have thought he would have been gone 2 years ago. I mean, how long are they going to keep Harbaugh? I mean,
well, I hate that. I'm going to play devil's advocate for it. I just killed the guy a second ago, but now I'm going to play devil's advocate for him. Outside of last year, which was a disaster for everybody, pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's no telling how much of an effect last year had.
True.
Outside of last year, I mean, if you take away, and I realize when you have a rivalry like that, eventually you have to beat the rival. But outside of last year, like I said, the disaster that was last season, which ultimately doesn't even really count, he hasn't really, again, there's the elephant in the room, which is he hasn't beaten Ohio State, and he's been beaten badly by Ohio State more often than not.
He hasn't won a division.
But that's because he hasn't beaten Ohio State. if you take that elephant out of the room, how bad has his time at Michigan really been when you consider what they were coming out of? You know,
Let me ask you this.
okay.
If they was coming out of something like that, do you think he'd still be the head coach at Alabama? I think you already answered that.
Well, no. Now, okay. When are we talking about him being the head coach? Because now, if you're talking about him becoming if he replaced Mike DeBoer, if he had replaced Mike DeBoer or Mike Schuler,
He did. You talking about Harbaugh or Saban?
yeah. If you take you take a coach with Jim Harbaugh's record, and he is hired to become the coach at Alabama. You take Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, and you transplant his record. You transplant everything he's done in Michigan, and you put him at Alabama right after Mike DuBois or more right after Mike Shula. Yes, I think he's on thin. I think he has a short leash. But yes, I think he's still there because you're talking about you have to look at what you're coming out of. Now, I'll say this about Jim Harbaugh. If he had directly replaced Lloyd Carr at Michigan,
his ass be gone.
never, huh?
He'd be gone.
You're right. And they never went through the Rich Rodriguez era, and they never went through the
what was that guy's name? Oh God.
Yeah, and they were coming off of the relative.
Brady Hoke, Brady Hoke.
Yeah, like I said, if you put Jim Harbaugh in those shoes, and he puts up the record that he puts up, I think he's already gone. But like I said, when you're rebuilding the team off of the hole that you had from Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke, and like I said, outside of last year, and I guess maybe the year before, because they lost a couple of games the year before too, but pretty much his only crime has been losing to Ohio State, which is a top. Ohio State's pretty much been in the top 5 every year that he's been there.
I mean that's it.
Uh,
That's what Michigan wants to be.
But like I said, you have to crawl before you can walk.
And I could even see I'm not going to say, a championship team. I can see a Minnesota slip up there and have a really good year.
Well, Minnesota, the Big Ten is, and now this is why, like I said, I think Harbaugh is on very thin ice, but I don't think that I would get rid of him. I wouldn't have gotten rid of him yet, but he is on thin ice because you have these Indianas and these Minnesotas and these Northwesterns that are coming up and that are changing the dynamic of the Big Ten.
And I'll say so else. If you go out and you fire her, you say, all right, you're done. Who are you gonna get?
Oh, if any team, any Midwestern team that fires a head coach, any big Midwestern team that fires a head coach, and Matt Campbell at Iowa State, I hire him.
I agree with that. I forgot to touch on something a while ago. I know they're not in the ACC officially, but how long is Notre Dame? I mean, he's had some good wins, but how long is Notre Dame going to hold on to Brian Kelly?
You know what? I'm going to make the exact same argument for Brian Kelly. Matter of fact, I'm going to make a better. I think Brian Kelly is actually in a better position than Harbaugh.
He's what one playoff or 2 playoffs?
He's been to 2 playoffs and a BCS national championship game.
Okay, that's right. He's been to 2 playoffs and a BCS national champion. He got beat 42-14 in the championship game. Clemson beat him 30-3. Now, I will say this right here. When I watched that Alabama game last year, he is one athlete away. One speedster at receiver, flanker, slot back. He is one athlete away from turning that team into a legitimate contender
I
because he held Alabama to what 32, 33 points. His defense played good enough to win that game. So he's close, but it's
I
taken him almost 10 years.
I 100% agree with you. Let me ask you this. This is the $1 million question. If you're Notre Dame, it's however much money Brian Kelly is making at Notre Dame. If you're gonna fault him for only being able to get to the playoff or get to the big game, but not being able to win it, and I like I said, I 100% agree with you. His major issue is that he doesn't have that breakaway athlete. Can he get that breakaway athlete at Notre Dame?
I think yes. I think yes. He should be able to go out there and find one because I was looking at some of those receivers he had. He had those white boys he had was 6'10", 230 pounds. I mean, you got a safety trying to cover somebody like that, and you got a breakaway receiver over there. That could be a really really dangerous team.
Oh yeah, like I said, I 100. And here's what I also said. If you look, I'm actually surprised at the level of NFL talent that has been through there. But it's like you said, they're bigger receivers. They're not as quick. They're not game changers.
Right.
He hasn't had a Devontae Smith he's had plenty of NFL receivers at Notre Dame, but he hasn't had a Devontae Smith. He hasn't
No,
had
no, somebody's gonna change the game like that. I mean,
right.
because that a lot of people forget that when Devontae caught that touchdown pass against Georgia, he caught that winning touchdown pass in the back of the end zone against Mississippi State.
Mm-hmm.
24-24. So I mean the Big Ten. Well, sorry, I got off on that. The Big Ten, will be interesting. So you went through that. Now, what about? I mean, to me, the big. One other thing I wanted to touch on while we was on the Big Ten. Why did Nebraska ever leave the Big 12 to go to the Big Ten? That just does not make any sense to me at all.
Texas. Blame it on Texas. That was Nebraska went from owning the Big Eight, and then when the Big Eight became the Big 12, they owned the Big 12 for a little bit. But then, as the Big 12, Oklahoma got good again, but then Texas became the big dog in the Big 12, and then Texas also. That's one thing about Texas. The University of Texas it's the same reason why Texas A&M is in the SEC right now. The University of Texas is the one school in America that will be a part of a conference, but will still they're Texas is the kind of school that you don't want to be in a conference with because Texas doesn't play fair.
But they don't. But the thing about Texas is, until Mac Brown won that national championship, they went 40 years without a national championship. I mean, Texas should be in the playoffs every single year. You've got 20 million kids dreaming of being a quarterback at Texas, and they can't recruit at Texas.
If I'm not mistaken, who was it that? God, there was a big time quarterback who, like you said, he dreamed about being the University of Texas quarterback, and they told him no.
Manziel was one of them.
Manziel, but then there have been lots of stories about that where, like I said, they've had these athletes who they just want to go to the. But that's the one thing. People talk about Texas and their level of recruiting that is in the state of Texas, but ultimately Texas has a University of Georgia like hold on the state of Texas. And it's like you said, they should have, because as many athletes as there are in Texas, they all want to go to the University of Texas first.
Right.
But like I said, it's outside of Mac Brown, who is a great coach. They haven't been able to, like I said, John Malkovich was a good coach.
What I heard about John Malkovich, though, he was so strict and just rough on his players that they hated him.
Well, yeah, well, but that was the error though. But like I said,
Uh,
he was well, even if you don't want to say he was a good, I was saying he was a good coach just to be a compliment to him.
oh yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you totally on that. And you know, and you're right there. But you know, there's not a doubt in my mind. If I was a head football coach, I mean, that I believe I've got the personality and know enough and the fire that I could go out there and get a job at Houston, and I believe I could win a national championship at Houston.
Well, I touched on it with the Florida schools. University of Houston is in the exact same position. They were all trying to get into all these the American the first they were trying to say instead of a power six, we're going to make instead of a power five, let's make it a power six. Because that they were what used to be the Big East.
Mm-hmm.
They had a seat at the table, but then once the table changed, they lost it. But now, if this playoff goes through the same way that they're talking about it, Houston, SMU,
Oh,
TCU.
I
Now,
was fixing. You named two teams. I was fixing to say. I mean, when I was thinking about that, SMU, TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech. I mean, I'm just looking at these schools right there that has these huge recruiting bases, huge fan bases. That
mhm.
you can look out. You know, open your window and yell out, and you can find 11 good football players.
Yeah,
you know, to come out there and play. And
and I agree. If
in
you
Texas can only get so many.
it's funny. 20 years ago, when the well now God, it's longer than about 25 years ago at this point. When the old Southwestern Conference broke apart and Baylor and Texas Tech. Now, there's lots of rumors about how it ultimately ended up happening, but they both got that golden ticket to get into the Big 12, and they left TCU behind, and they left SMU behind, and they left Houston behind, and they left
Yes.
behind. They lived high on the hog for 25 years, and I mean they had some bright moments here or there, but ultimately they never did anything with it. But now like I said, if this playoff goes through the way that it is, who would you rather be? Would you rather be Houston and SMU, or would you rather be Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU in the Big 12?
Oh, that's a no-brainer right there. I mean, yeah, I'd a whole lot rather be not be playing in that in the Big 12.
Yeah, because
Uh,
like I said, Oklahoma's not go. Lincoln Riley is hell. He's what 30, 33, 32, 33.
yeah, unless he goes to the NFL, and and talking about a while ago that Nebraska, I cannot believe Nebraska never came back. I mean, when they fired Frank Solich, he had an 87% winning percentage, and they just never came back. And I mean, like I said, you get two fast tailbacks, a smart quarterback that can throw, one receiver, and six big linemen, and just pound the rock all day long, and they can't stop you.
And especially Nebraska, they built their identity on that, and it fit them because it's like I'm a Georgia Tech fan, and people used to always say even though we have our academic requirements, Georgia
Yeah,
Tech should be able to recruit better than what they have done historically.
and Georgia Tech has.
Well, I mean they've always had some good athletes here or there, but their Georgia Tech has never been able to go toe to toe with Georgia or
Right,
Alabama.
and you've
And
also got a school of only what 4,000 students or 5,000 students there,
right.
as
But
opposed to going to one of those other ones.
so people always said, that was always the debate. Does Georgia Tech have to run the triple option to succeed, to have success? Jury's still out. Nebraska, that's not a question at Nebraska because Nebraska, you're not going to get. Who are you going to recruit at Nebraska? You're going
Oh
to have.
no, I mean, like when they hired Bill Callahan to come in there and run a pro set, and I thought, where are you going to get these black athletes to come in there and run a pro set offense? I mean, and I know this is not meant to be sound racist. I mean, I hope nobody would be stupid enough to think I would say this, but at Nebraska, you need 6 big white offensive linemen and a big white tight end, a white fullback, 2 speedy tailbacks, black quarterback that can run the option and throw, and 1 receiver that's a game burner, and you're going to win.
Well, no, and like I said, I don't think anything's wrong with anything that you just said, because actually that's how Tom Osborne built that program. Because you take what are you gonna get in the state of Nebraska? You're gonna get a bunch of big corn-fed boys.
That's
Same.
all you're getting.
What's Wisconsin doing? Wisconsin is doing the same.
Yes, you're going to get a bunch of 6'6", 350-pound white boys that you're going to put up there on that offensive line, and you're going to do the same thing on the defensive line, and you're going to have a couple athletic linebackers, and and then all you've got to do is have some two fast corners and 2 big strong safeties, and you're going to win a national championship. I mean, pounding the rock with them.
And then you go, and then like you said, you go to all these Tommy Frazier. Tommy Frazier was why did he go to Nebraska? Because other schools wanted him to be a safety, wanted him to be a cornerback, wanted him to play defense. When you were at Nebraska, you had that advantage running that option, because you could say, hey, they want you to do something else. I think you could run quarterback. And guess what? Forget what they tell you. Forget what you see all these tapes. You see these throws. We're throwing the ball, and you know what? Now, yes, if we're controlling the clock and there's only so many possessions to go around, then yeah, you might not be able to put up those big gaudy passing numbers. But guess what? If we can also light up scoreboard too. So guess what? There's plenty of opportunities for us to put up big numbers.
How many times did you see him have, 85-yard touchdown pass when, the safety? I mean, I've seen it so many times. I mean, safety's lined up and receiver running right down the field, and him, and him having 225 yards passing off three completions and 3 touchdowns.
And that's all you got to do. That's all you had to do. But they, like I said, they wanted to go into the 20th century, 21st century, so to speak, and that Nebraska is and I'm not sure if they can now. Tennessee and Nebraska are the 2 powers, ex-powers, former powers, if you want to say.
I don't think they'll ever be back.
I don't think so either, because, like I said, first of all, the problem is that when you had an advantage, you went away from the advantage that you had. Now you've got to try to find some other advantage at a time in an era when, like I said, you see Nick Saban, you see Ryan Day, you see all these coaches at all these big time programs. They're doing the things that they're adopting the same ideas that the little programs go to give them an advantage.
I still think in Nebraska, you could go in there and get a coach who runs the triple option, and he could go out and he could get him 2 or 3 backs and those big corn-fed white boys, and he could bring that team back quick. I think Nebraska.
Are you going to make that commitment to it? You got to make that commitment.
Oh, I think Nebraska would. Yes, I think that you would go in there and make it, and I think you go in there, and I think you can go in there with some of these players, and you're going to find them. It may not be this kid that everybody's looking at, but you're going to find that 2-star that nobody's paying attention to, that's actually going to be a 5-star player that's going to come out there on the field and light them up for 300 yards a game. And I think you could go back in there and sell that at Nebraska.
You need to get a 2-star. You probably know this name I'm about to throw at you, Justin Thomas.
Oh yeah,
played at Georgia Tech. He was a 4-star athlete recruit. Alabama told him, "We may let you play quarterback. We'll let you." Alabama told him, "We'll let you compete, and we'll let you compete to be a quarterback. And if you make it, you make it. If you don't make it, we'll move you to another position." Georgia Tech told him, "We will let you be a quarterback. You are going to be a quarterback." And he ended up going to Georgia Tech. Like I said, 4-star athlete. you can get those kind of players if you make that kind of commitment, but you got to make that commitment to it. And
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if I would like. I agree with. I thought Kansas made it. Now Kansas hired a good coach in Lance Leopold, but I'm not sure how good of a job he's going to end up doing when he's doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. But
at a school like that, and just my opinion, you're either going to have to come in there and go with a triple option or something like that, or you're going to go out there with 5 wide receivers and you're going to be throwing the ball all over the place.
But you got to think, doing the 5 wide receiver thing, Oklahoma's doing that, but Oklahoma's got better wide receivers than you.
Right.
Texas is doing that, but they got better wide receivers than you.
Right.
Alabama's doing that, but they got better wide receivers than you do.
But remember, you ain't got to have 5. You only got to have 1 or 2.
Right.
You got 1 or 2 out there, and it ain't got to be a thing where you want there 5, but if you're mixing it up, and things like that, you just can't. I was watching a replay of a game the other day. It was one of my favorite games that I did on my Saturdays of South gone by, and it was when Kentucky was playing Alabama, and Kentucky jumped up to it was in '87. They jumped up to a 17-0 lead, and it was like 27 going in the fourth quarter, and Alabama reeled off 300 yards offense and scored. And and I'm watching Alabama run in the I formation. And I'm like, those days are gone. Nobody runs out of the I formation anymore. Florida State used to, but I haven't seen that in forever. It's just, and it may come back, but
I want to say the last coach that I saw run out of is Georgia, University of Georgia. I think they're the last, and now they've gone to more single back, but they do still like the fullback. But I that's pretty much the last.
I guess it depends on the fullback depends on a lot which kind of back you've got. If you want to back like a Barry Sanders, who's looking for his holes, or Emmitt Smith who's falling back there, and touch on Georgia for a minute. The great me and my friend was talking the other day. The greatest athlete I've ever seen in my life was Bo Jackson. The greatest running back I ever seen in my life was Herschel Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Herschel didn't avoid. Herschel ran towards you, and Herschel ran to run you over. I used to love watch clips of Herschel, and Herschel would be running down the field, and he would see somebody and cut and go 20 yards over just to run the guy over. And I was reading the first game they was playing Tennessee, and there's
Herschel Walker.
Tennessee was down 15. Georgia's down 15-2, and the crowd was chanting, "We want Herschel." And I think Vince put him in the second quarter. I can't believe it took him that long. And he said, "Don't be afraid to give Herschel the ball." And and the first play, I think Herschel went was a tall sweep, and legendary Dallas Cowboys safety Bill Bates tried to tackle him, and he said it was like trying to tackle tree stumps. He ran slap over Bill Bates, and Herschel. If I really believe if Herschel not screwed up and signed that contract and came back for his 4th season, that team finished 10-1-1.
Mm-hmm.
And you put Herschel on that team. That's another national championship. That was one thing I forgot to touch on a while ago about that. When Miami beat Nebraska, that was the year Auburn got screwed. Auburn had the number 1 schedule in the nation. They'd lost to Texas at the beginning of the season, like 20-7, and they had a gauntlet where I think they played 8 top 20 teams and like 6 in the top 10. Couple in the top 4. They beat Michigan 9-7 in the Sugar Bowl. I think Michigan was ranked like 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nebraska was ranked 1. Miami was ranked 5th, and Texas was ranked 2nd. Well, Miami lost, Texas lost, Auburn was ranked 3rd, and Miami jumped all the way to number 1.
Yeah.
and Auburn stayed at 3. And I was like, God, they got screwed out of that.
I want to say nobody went into that game, that national championship. Nobody went into that game thinking that that was a national championship game.
Well,
It
what
was
happened
title game
was,
for Nebraska, but it wasn't for Miami.
well, and I was listening. What they billed it was is yes, it was for. You're right. It was billed for Miami. I mean, for Nebraska. But when Texas lost, it started being billed as the national. The number 2 and the number 4 teams lost. I forgot who the fourth one was.
Might have been
But
Penn State.
think you're right. It started being billed as the national championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the media started hyping it. And, if you want to give Miami a share of it, I'm fine with that. But Auburn deserved a share of that national championship. I mean, to have that kind of schedule and to run that gauntlet and, and Auburn, it went home on the bus thinking they'd won the national championship. I mean, if they'd been Alabama, they would have got it. They would.
I remember reading an article about like the all-time greatest teams who never won it, who didn't win, who the best teams of a certain season who didn't win the national championship. And I want to say Auburn had like 3 out of the top 10 should have won national, but of course they had the 2 seasons where they were on probation.
It would have been 83, I'm guessing. 93. Now in 94 they went 9-1-1. And 2004 they went undefeated.
That was the other one, the 2004.
I'm going to tell you something. People tell me I'm crazy.
No. Hold that thought. It was a season back in the 50s or the 60s.
Now in the 50s, they did win a national championship. Now they could have been on probation in the 60s, but in the 50s, they did win a national championship on probation. It was in 57. They split it with Ohio State. Auburn went 10-0 and split it. But
they were on probation that year, right?
Yeah, they were on probation, but they were still awarded, because back then they still award you a national championship. But that 2004 team, and I still believe this right here, I don't know what I think they would have destroyed USC. USC had not seen that type of defense, and they had not seen Cadillac Williams and Ronnie Brown, and Auburn would have ran all over them. It would. I'll say this right here. USC may have still beat them. They wouldn't have beat them 55-19 like they beat Oklahoma.
I will agree. It would have been a great that would have been a great football game. I still think that USC team from and you know what, I might be willing to give you this because that Auburn team was older, and that USC team that was the beginning, or not really, they were in the middle, but they still had room to get better because they went in. I still say that the 2005 USC team was the best team out of that run. They just happened to run up against, in my opinion.
Oh my God. I thought that game was over with. I mean, they had a double-digit lead. They had 4th and inches, and they stopped Vince Young, and I could not believe that.
Like that is arguably the all-time greatest single player performance that I've ever seen in a college, where just one guy, and basically you got to think what Texas was running. It was basically you talk about it was single wing football.
Oh yeah.
Vince takes the snap, he fakes it to the running back. He either gives it to the running back or he fakes it. He either and once he doesn't give it to the running back, he either it was triple option football, except he was out of the shotgun, and that was it.
I mean, that one. I mean, and of course the plays he was making. Another one that I seen where a player just puts it on his shoulders was in. It was in 1980. It's when Georgia won the national championship game, and on the second play, Herschel dislocated his shoulder, and they went up and told Vince Herschel's out. And Vince said, "What do you mean he's out?" They said he's dislocated his shoulder. He's out for the season. And they went back and told Herschel. They said, "You're out for the season." And Herschel said, "What are you talking about?" They said, "You've dislocated your shoulder." And he said, "I'm not out for the season." They said, "Herschel, this is a season-ending injury." He said, "Pop it back into place." And he ended up rushing for like 140 something yards. I cannot imagine the pain he was going through taking those licks, put that team on his back. And and you know, and one of the great calls then, that Georgia would never got it. I heard Vince say later he was hoping just to get up to around the 30-yard line to get a first down and get another play to get him in field goal range. But when Scott hit Blue and he made that turn, there was nothing but green grass all the way in front of him. And I can still remember Larry Munch, "Run, Lindsey, run, run, Lindsey, run."
Blue hit Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said it backwards. Yeah, Blue hit Scott. I mean, and that was just, phenomenal. When that was my favorite calls ever. So we had that one. Okay, so what was there was another game I was going to talk about. I wanted to touch on. Blue hit Scott, but anyway. Okay, so we went down to the Pac. We haven't touched on the Pac-12 yet.
Do we need? That's the $1 million question. Do we need to touch on the Pac-12?
Well, let me tell you what I do. And this is when we'll be having our conversations. That's just to kill the rest of the night because I'm usually watching. I mean, I'm watching a Boise State and whoever out there, and it's really just to kill the time and rehash the day's games. I think that Oregon could make a comeback.
I'm gonna say now. I know that they lost a lot of talent to the NFL. Because I was actually shocked by how many players they lost, and I know they got some transfers too. If USC can get, if this is put up or shut up year for USC, you have an actual full season. Because I really do think that if they had finished, if they hadn't have lost to UCLA and Oregon last year, they should have been a playoff team. And I thought there were times where I saw USC during the season where I said, "Wow, they can hang. They look like hang."
I'm
But
sorry,
they laid those eggs.
How can you not recruit at USC? I mean, I'm sitting there. My friend keeps going, "Well," he says, they're California boys. I said, "Look, I would not be recruiting California boys. I would be going to, all over America and going, hey, come hang out in Hollywood for 4 years and live on the beach around movie stars and all. I mean, this is where you want to be. I mean, you don't want to be stuck down here in, Oxford, Mississippi. Come out here and live in paradise, man. You're on the beach. You're hanging out with movie stars. How can you not recruit there?"
It's not. I keep going back to this. Now, yes, they maybe aren't doing as well as they should be, but USC and I'll even throw it out to UCLA. They are bringing in talent.
That's another one. I've never understood how UCLA cannot recruit to be a national power. I mean, I don't get it.
It's the coaching. They
bring in good coaches. Who was that guy? Tom. Oh God, Tom something. He was there for 20 years and went on to went on to be something with the 49ers. Tom.
Terry Donahue.
Terry Donahue. That was his name. Yeah. I mean,
now here, Terry Donahue. When Terry Donahue was there, UCLA was kind of when Terry Donahue was there, they just couldn't get over the hump. So, right. they had Rodney Peete. They had some. No, they didn't. Rodney Peete was USC. They had Troy Aikman. They got him out of Oklahoma.
How they never go there to be an option quarterback? That shocked. I could never figure that out.
I was too young to have seen it, but apparently he actually did. Apparently he actually did play and run the option because remember he was the '86 team when they won the when Oklahoma won the national championship. I want to say Troy
He
Aikman was
broke
supposed to be.
he broke his ankle one year, and I don't remember which one it was.
Let's say it was that year. He was supposed to be the starting quarterback, and that's why they had to end up going with Holloway.
But now that you mentioned that about coaching, and I got sitting there thinking back, USC, the coaches they had, Larry Dixon, Paul Hackett, um, uh, what was that other joker's name they brought back? God.
John Robinson was a good coach.
John Robinson, but he was past, I think he was past his prime then. But they had somebody
that was exactly his problem. He was past it the second time around. But remember, the first time around, he won a national championship. He won a.
He was bad. He was a bad boy his first time. But they had like Paul Hackett, Larry Dixon. They had some guy was it, I can't
Larry
remember,
Smith.
but they
Guy
Larry Smith. Yeah, Larry Smith. They had brought in all these coaches, and it was like, I just couldn't believe, how could you not get somebody like that, and then, like I said, Robinson was past his prime. Now, the rumor has it that they called, I think it was in the year after they fired him, or that Stixon fired him, they offered Lou Holtz the job.
Ooh, that would be I don't know if Lou Holtz could. I don't know about Lou Holtz in LA. I don't know if that's. But
I don't know if his personality could have handled LA.
No.
But they said the thing that kept him from taking the job, and this is amazing that she's still alive, but his wife Beth had lung, liver, pancreas, bone, and blood cancer, and she's still alive 25 years later.
Wow. That
so, yeah, I don't know if Lou Holtz could have made it at USC.
Well, you know what? Along this path, you mentioned him earlier for Bama. And I would have liked to have seen him not go to the NFL because who I do, what job I do think Urban Meyer would excel at is either one of those two schools.
I made this statement a couple of years ago to one of my friends who's a big USC fan, and I told him, I said, Urban Meyer will be the next coach at USC.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't, and he's still young enough that, it could happen. But I think Urban Meyer would be a huge success at USC. I mean,
it's the exact opposite. USC and UCLA are the exact opposite of say, Alabama, in that
right.
They are low. Alabama is high stress. Those two places are low stress. As long as you're winning, as well as as long as you're competing at a high enough level. Because even this guy, the guy, I forget his name, Helton. I mean,
yeah.
If he had the kind of record that he's got at USC, well, you see what Tom Herman got fired at Texas a year after going to the Sugar. Didn't Tom Herman go to 2 Cotton Bowls, or was it just the one?
Yes. And do you know? I don't know if you know the story about that, but LSU couldn't come up with the money,
Mm-hmm.
and Herman took the Texas job, and LSU wanted him, and they couldn't come up with the money to buy him out, and Texas outbidded him.
Well, that, yeah, because that was the year because they fired Les Miles. What was it? Did he get fired the week after they lost to Auburn? Like that crazy game.
They were that made them 2-2. They completed a pass if time ran out, and then they fired Les Miles after that game.
That was
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking. And they fired him that early because I want to say the Tom Herman, they had just won. No, that was the year that Houston had that big year, and then they collapsed down the stretch. But that was what made Tom Herman that big. Everybody wanted Tom Herman at the time, and then like you said, Texas outbidded them for him because that's why LSU fired Les Miles so early, was because LSU thought they were going to be able to get out ahead of everybody, ahead of the curve, but then money talks.
I wonder how much truth there was to this, and I believe that he considered it. That it was in 2000. He was getting up in age then. I mean, he was 63, but supposedly after 2013 season, when the kick six, Saban was offered a 10-year, $100 million contract from Texas.
I remember those rumors. I remember that.
And at first, I kind of blew it off and didn't think anything about it. But then the stuff came out more, and they said that Saban had actually looked at who he was going to bring in on his staff to be to be his coaches. And I wonder how and of course anybody's going to throw $100 million at you. You're going to think about it.
You know why? I don't think Saban. You know why I don't think that he would have taken it.
And I think I know what you're going to say. Why? But go ahead.
Who now? Yeah, Alabama has boosters, but who is in charge of the program who is in charge of everything at Alabama?
Everybody answers to Nick Saban.
Who is in charge of everything in Texas? Texas?
All those oil boosters.
That's exactly right. That's why Saban would never go to Texas.
And like you remember when Mal Moore died, Bill Battle was the interim athletic director for 10 years when they didn't hire an athletic director. You answer to Saban at Alabama. Saban would never had that control out there at Texas. Now, the one that I wanted, and I think he would have done fine. Now, he would never do nothing like Saban. I mean, this is unprecedented. Nobody will ever have this run. But when the rumors first started breaking, and I was so excited, was when I heard that Steve Spurrier had a $10 million, $30 million, a 10-year, $30 million contract on the table at Alabama. And I was jumping up and down screaming.
And when was it? Was this after Du Bois or after Shula?
That was after Shula. And Shula would have been, Spurrier had been 50, 59, 58, something like that.
He would have
But that was
South
Carolina.
He would have been coming from South Carolina.
He'd been coming from South Carolina. But I think Spurrier would have been an awesome fit at Alabama.
He would have.
I mean, I think he would have won a national. I mean, he would have won championships. I mean, and it all worked out. But that's who I wanted. I mean, was Spurrier.
The only thing with Spurrier at South Carolina is just that there's just too much of a hole at South Carolina can never really fight to be anything other than number 3 out of the SEC East.
They did win one, SEC title, and then the thing that's so amazing though is he had those 3 straight 11-2s and couldn't get to the SEC championship game. I mean, he was so close, and I think that was one of the reasons he took that job is he wanted to win an SEC title at South Carolina.
But now, that year that he won the SEC East, who was at Georgia?
That was
obviously it was Mark Richt.
That was still Rick, yeah.
Yeah, but it was probably one of those bouncy years where Georgia loses 2 or 3 year games where they shouldn't have lost.
That was the year that, if I recall right, that was the year that Rick finished 6 and 7.
Okay, and then that was probably if that's the 6 and 7 year, that was about what 2012, 2011, 2012.
That was 2010. So that's the year Auburn won the national championship, and that was also the year that Urban Meyer finished 8-5.
Or
So
he did coach that year.
yeah, because after Meyer got beat by Alabama, he had the heart attack he faked, and then he came back, went 8-5, and left. So Georgia and Florida was down. It kind of reminds me think about back in the 90s when you had Alabama, Auburn, and LSU down, and Mississippi State won that.
Mississippi State and Arkansas.
Arkansas went to 3, and Mississippi State went to 1, and that was the year Tennessee won the national championship. And I thought, in the back of my mind, I was not going to be surprised because State was a dogged team that year, and I thought State had a chance in that game. And I remember it was 17-17. Late in the fourth quarter, 5 or 6 minutes to go, and State was still very much in that game. And State punted to try to pin Tennessee inside the 10. And Tennessee broke loose and scored a touchdown, and finally ended up being 24-7. But I mean, Sherrill had some dogged teams. They said that Sherrill, because I knew a guy who had some connections then, and they came really close when they fired Dubose to hiring Sherrill, but they were so scared because Sherrill had been in probation every time he'd been there.
That would have been a match made in hell.
Oh, they would have given Alabama the death penalty. Sherrill I forgot how much it was worth at the time, but when Sherrill got hired at Texas A&M, I think his contract was 5 years, $4.1 million, and it was the highest paid contract in America.
Yeah, because he was the after that run at Pitt, no, not Pitt. That's Johnny Majors.
No, but he followed Johnny Majors at Pitt.
Okay.
And he did have a hell of a run. He was like 11-1, 11-1, 10-2, 11-1, and he came close to winning national championships. But he was hot. I was surprised Majors never could put it together at Tennessee, though.
Well, it's kind of put it together when you got your lead assistant stabbing you in the back.
Yeah, but he did that later. Kind of later on. He won some SEC championships earlier. I think he won 3, but I don't know if you remember, Sherrill Majors would go in there and he would have these wide open offenses and then play Alabama and then run the ball up the middle 3 times and punt.
Sounds kind of like Gus Malzahn against the University of Georgia.
Well, you know who else it sounds like too? It sounds like that both years, really. The first year when Alabama played Georgia in that championship game, and Alabama was down 13-0 at the half. And I told my friend was watching the game, I said, Saban's going to pull Jalen. And he said, no, he's not. I said, I promise you. I said, he's going to pull him. And he said, he's not going to pull him. He said, you got to ride or die with him now. I said, I bet you everything I got. I said, Saban is going to pull him at half. And sure enough, he came out and pulled him. And then, Kirby they'd been throwing the ball and they'd been gashing Alabama on the corners. Well, Fromm threw one interception, and then Kirby stops throwing the ball and he starts running straight in the teeth of that Alabama defense. And that was it. And he did the same thing next year. And I don't know if he gets psyched out or what Kirby does. But I mean, yeah, I knew Saban was going to pull Tua. Pull Jalen.
Oh, yeah, I think Saban had. Kirby still has to show. Like I said, JT Daniels will maybe not give him we'll maybe never know because JT Daniels should be just good enough that he never has that situation come up. But Kirby has to show that he's willing to do that because when he had Justin Fields, everybody in the state of Georgia knew Jake Fromm is a nice quarterback. He's in the NFL right now.
He's a game manager.
He's a game manager. Justin Fields is the type of talent that would actually give you. Jake Fromm was a game manager. Justin Fields is a game breaker.
And what did he do when he went to Ohio State?
He
I was like, look at this right here. I mean, I could see, and I don't get this stuff about seniors. I could look there and tell who the best quarterback was. It's like, I love Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen is great, but I could look and I knew Tua was the guy that you needed to go with.
Because Tua at the time was, and that's what I like about Saban. Saban, I really do think that Saban went to Jalen and told him, we're going to give you a chance to compete, and if you don't get the job, we're going to still work with you. We're not going to cast you to the side. Because who was the quarterback coach that year that was supposed to be the guy who was supposed to be like this quarterback guru?
I think he's the black dude that went to Maryland.
No, well, he was the offensive coordinator, but he used to be the coach at Central Michigan. And
I know who you're talking about.
What's that?
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but he was supposed to be so known for how he worked with quarterbacks, and that I really do think that that's why when Jalen went to Oklahoma, that's why he was good when he went to Oklahoma.
When he went to Oklahoma, I mean, that was like night and day. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was good at Alabama, but when I watched him at Oklahoma, I was like, God Almighty. I mean, that the guy was phenomenal, and I mean, and it was just great, and and Saban held that together. I mean, he did. I mean, it could easily fell apart, but I mean, and that's the thing about him. Like I said, I told him, I said, I knew he was going to pull him. I knew it. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind because Saban has that instinct that he'll pull the trigger where some guys won't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
he runs his program in a way to where the guy who is having the trigger pulled on him knows, because again, it's competition. It's Georgia Tech's head coach who worked under Saban for a couple of years. He has that same. It's competition is king. Just because I'm pulling you today because you're not doing the job today, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to need you tomorrow, or I'm not going to need you the next. So you better be you. Yeah, I'm pulling you today because you did not step up to the plate today. But that just means when we go out there on that practice field tomorrow, you better work, and because guess what? Just as easily as I pulled the plug on you today, I might pull the plug on this other guy tomorrow, right or wrong. So that's
I mean, and and there'll never be another one like you always heard there'll never be another Coach Bryant. I mean, there'll never be another Saban. And I mean, we're witnessing, one of the greatest runs ever that we'll never see again. I mean, there'll never be nothing like this again. And I'm loving it. One thing, and I wanted to ask you this, because I pissed a Georgia fan off about this because they was talking about Georgia and championships this right here, and I said, where do you get off entitled? I said, you're not Alabama, you're not even Auburn. I mean, where do you're not even Auburn. Where do you get that you're Alabama at?
Mm-hmm. It's because University of Georgia, and I say this as someone who has lived in the state of Georgia just about my entire life. University of Georgia fans, first of all, you have to realize, and when I say what I'm about to say, I'm not meaning this in a disparaging way, because I don't know, I doubt that you went to Alabama, and I definitely didn't go to Georgia Tech, but we root for who we root for.
Right.
But most University of Georgia fans have never set foot on the University of Georgia campus, but they have this complex that we're the university, because everything in the state of Georgia is geared towards the University of Georgia.
And I see that, but to me, Georgia, with what they're recruiting, Georgia should be competing every year. I mean, besides Georgia Tech and maybe Auburn, I mean, they're not recruiting against anybody.
They're not recruiting against Georgia Tech. I mean,
Yeah, because Georgia Tech's a private, private university. I mean, Georgia has nobody to recruit against. I mean, how are they not better?
That's the thing. If the University of Georgia goes into any child's goes unless the child is unless their parents went to Auburn, Georgia Tech, Alabama, unless they're one of those type of people, University of Georgia walks into any parents goes into any recruit's house in the state of Georgia, that
Right.
wants to go to Georgia. It's
Right.
it's something that's inbred in people from I dare say from birth. But they just and it goes back to Mark Richt. I would say Mark Richt was a very good coach. But Mark,
Yeah, I think Rick got a raw deal. I mean, maybe he was ready to go, and maybe it was a mutual thing. But I thought Rick got a raw deal.
I Mark Richt, if Mark Richt is 10 to 20 years too young. He was born 10 to 20 years later than what he should have been born. If Mark Richt had came up in that Bobby Bowden, Joe Paterno type era, he'd be a lifer.
The
But Mark
stupidest
Richt
thing I
suffered from
believe. The stupidest thing I believe I think it was in 2015. The stupidest thing I ever seen him do was it was a driving rainstorm, and Alabama takes the field, and they start jogging, and Rick sends his entire team over to stand at the Alabama sideline and just glaring at the Alabama players, and the Alabama players never even looked at them, never even acknowledged them, just looked straight ahead and kept jogging, never said a word while they was talking shit. And they asked the Alabama players later, they said, well, all that did was just piss us off. And I was like, why would you go in there and try to intimidate Alabama, who is used to playing in every big game there is, and you think that you're going to intimidate them by coming over there looking at them?
Well, it's fun. He did that. He did something like that one year against Florida,
Hey,
and it worked.
here's what happened. If you remember, they got a penalty the week before against excessive celebration, and he jumped all over his team for it. And then the next week, he sent his team out there to jump up to pile on. And I was like, why did you punish them and then tell them to do it? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, I know what you're talking about, but this is back when this was back when
Oh,
this was earlier. Like I said, because this was back when Florida still had the winning streak. The Spurrier was gone, but they still
yeah.
had the winning streak against them. And he did something. I can't remember what it was exactly, but there was some kind of gimmick or something that he did against Florida, and it worked. And then ever since then, he figured that he could do, it, and he only did it every once in a while. Like he did like that Florida game that you're talking about, the Bama game, the infamous black jersey game with Alabama.
Oh my God, that that was a beat down. I mean,
Yeah,
Georgia cut it. I think the final was 41-30, but I think it was like 38-3 or 38-10 at half or something.
Alabama jumped on them, and then they threw on some late scores to make it look like it was a respectable game, but it wasn't.
Yeah, but it was
Like
never. I mean, it was a total beat down.
like I said, I remember I can't remember the exact circumstance, but I remember he did it again. And of course, it was the fact that it was Ron Zook's Florida, and it wasn't Steve Spurrier's Florida, or at least it
Right.
wasn't Steve Spurrier. It wasn't a vintage Steve Spurrier. Because it might have because I think their times overlapped a little bit, but it was like I said, right around there, and he did something against Florida that everybody said, "Oh, you broke the win," that it broke the losing streak and blah blah or not, whatever. And ever since he did that, he would just break it out every once in a while. He would bring out these gimmicks and then more often than not, it would end up blowing up in his face.
You know, I wonder what happened down there in Miami.
When he with Rick.
Yeah, because you know that first year he's like 9-4, and then he went 10-3, and then he went 7-6, and then just retired. And I just wonder, what happened for them to really force him out? And
He refused to fire his son.
he what?
He refused to fire his son.
Oh, was that what it was?
Yeah, he was. His son was the. I don't think it was. His son was like the quarterback's coach or something. And I'm saying the son, but it was there was like three or I think they wanted to fire the offensive coordinator too, but it was basically they wanted him to change out the offense, and he refused. He said no, I'm not gonna can these guys because I don't think that these guys are the problem, and so they mutually agreed that he would go, and then that's when they
I
brought.
kind of have some respect for him on that. Firing your son, and I respect that.
I will again. I hate the University of Georgia with all my fiber, but Mark Richt and I have plenty of reasons to dislike Mark Richt because he gave us close to 20 years of reasons to want to hate him. Mark Richt is a damn good man, and I would say he's a
I've
very.
heard that. I've heard that he was a very religious man and very loyal.
And one thing about Mark Richt that I've noticed is that one time ESPN was doing this special where they went through and they showed like all the coaches' offices and everything. And they showed Mark Richt's office. And there's for the Georgia Tech and Georgia rivalry, there's this Governor's Cup that they give away.
Yeah.
And I would have imagined that nobody would have cared about it because nobody in the state actually cares about it because they don't even make a big trophy sell. They don't even do the trophy thing or anything. But it was in his office. He had like replicas of the cups, and when he had like a little thing, he said that's your rivalry. You got to respect your rivalry, and that's why, like I said, I hate that he always beat us, but that's why he always beat us. It's because he respects
that. I mean, and most of them I have. I mean, there's some coaches I didn't like, but I always liked Rick. I mean, I respected him. I mean, I did.
He's one of the. That's why you notice I've said that there are good coaches and there are great coaches, but Mark Richt, he's one of the few guys that I will say is a very good coach because I will make sure to put a distinction between him and the guys that I just say are just good because I personally feel that he doesn't deserve to just be called a good coach, but you don't win a national championship, you don't get to be called a great coach. Right. So I have that little special designation for people like him.
And you can also tell the coaches who really care about their players, who want them to succeed in life, and are just not there to get them in and get them out. Mm-hmm. And I've seen plenty of coaches like that, come and go. And the biggest thing to me when I say that I think that makes a good coach into a great coach is, if you don't have discipline on that team, you're not going to win. You are not, if you don't control your players, you can forget it.
That's exactly, and it's something funny that it's funny that you mentioned that, and I don't know if you intended this, but it's funny that you mentioned this right when we were talking about Mark Richt. But there used to always be the joke about how University of Georgia would always have X amount of players suspended for the first half against their warm-up opponent before they played South Carolina the next week.
I forgot about that.
there was always that little running joke. But and people always used to say, well, that's a sign of that's a sign of a poorly disciplined team. But and you know, I as a Georgia Tech fan, I picked up. I admittedly played along with the joke for a while, but then I really once in reality, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm really sitting there saying to myself, why are we joking about a guy who's actually punishing? That to me, that's showing discipline. Like when you look at it, I alluded to it earlier. Urban Meyer at Florida. How many times did we talk about players getting suspended at Florida when Urban Meyer was there?
Oh God.
There weren't too many. I don't remember there being too many suspensions when he was there.
No.
But now you turn around, you
No.
see what Aaron Hernandez was doing everything that he was doing while he was there.
Murdering people.
You had the Pouncey twins, and you had the all these other things going on over there. Yeah, we all looked at Tim Tebow as a saint. I mean, Tim Tebow is a good guy, but that Urban Meyer was basically running the 90s Dallas Cow. He had the 90s Dallas
Yeah, the
Cowboys on that.
90s Dallas Cowboys.
He had that going on at Gainesville. But
I mean,
nobody ever talked about discipline being an issue with his teams because he never punished anybody. And I that's like I said, I admit that I played into it as a fan of an opposing school, but in retrospect, you got to respect him because, like you said, he was with. And yeah, okay, you're sitting out guys against for the first half against West Texas State. Who
yeah.
really cares? But that is still you're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what.
But,
My phone is actually running down.
well, this has been a good conversation, man.
It has been.
I've enjoyed this. I didn't realize we'd been this long. I guess what we'll do is, I need to get my magazines and we'll start going over it and say maybe about another month we'll go there on. And I tell you what we'll do. I don't know how long it'll take, but we'll go down like the conferences, the Power Five, and we'll go down team by team and analyze team by team, and then I can just break it down into individual videos. Like one for the SEC, one for the ACC, and do it like that, and have separate videos.
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, it was good talking to you on the phone, man, and
Talk to you too.
man, I'm telling you, I was so glad that I found you in that group because you are definitely one of the stars of the Killer Angels.
I
Well, I mean,
appreciate
you are, man. You know more, and of course, I'll cut this part out where I can't hear it. But I mean, I don't know if you see my last two comments that I made today. But I just had to come back in and I commented. I said, I have to say this right here. I, for the life of me, cannot figure out how somebody can say that you lost a third of your army, 13 general officers, 4 division commanders, and you won the campaign because you won some head of cattle.
it's it and like you said, you're going to cut this out, but it's mind boggling because it's